hardest working man in showbiz, right?
Oh, yeah.
And she's the hardest working lawyer that I've ever met. And I know a lot
Yes.
of hard working lawyers.
Yes, I see her on MSNBC.
Oh, really? She's been there. I listen to her program because my sister is
Oh yeah, WBAI.
Oh.
I listen to her program because my
All right, how come I'm getting the Facebook thing? All
live
right.
Facebook over here. It says live Facebook over here, Helen.
Yeah, you all, it should be live on Facebook. I just had to turn off where I
It's
am.
live. Mhm.
You guys can see it on Facebook?
I can't see it on Facebook, but it says live on Facebook. So
Oh, okay, I see. Yep.
But then
Hey,
again,
Claudia, Keto, what's happening, girl? When are you doing the art show?
Yes.
When are you gonna do it?
In August.
Oh, well, you'll have to share the information so those of us who are local can support it. Hey, Laura
Thank you.
Bryant, haven't seen you in a month of Sundays, as the old folks used to say.
I know, Helen, and that's literally true. It has been a month of Sundays.
The old folks probably still say that, huh?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Oh, Miss Montford. Hey, girl, I saw you sign in early today, you and Paulette.
Yeah.
Let me go. Good to
hi,
see you.
Kim. Hi, cousin.
Yeah. Hey, cousin.
We have to come on here to see each other. And you, I don't want to see a picture. I want to see you live.
I don't know if you want. I want a chance that. But let me see what I can do. I'm on my cell phone. Trust me.
Hey, Leslie, birthday girl, what's happening? You still celebrating? Can't hear you, Leslie. Leslie turned a big 50 last week, and we had a nice. She celebrated for 50 days, so that was exciting.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, that was cool.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. All right, so what we're gonna do, first of all, let me say again, I did not do a registration link today. So if you're new with us, please share your email address in the chat. You can send it to me privately, or you can put it out there for everybody, and I will add you to our list. Hey, Pat Johnson, how you doing, girlfriend?
Hi, I'm here.
Okay. Anastasia, love to see you, girl. You're gonna love Gloria. You're gonna be her new best friend.
Hey, Helen.
Revolutionaries in spirit out. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. If everybody can mute, and Linda and Laura and Lisa and Tracy, I've made you all co-hosts, so if you can help me manage keeping people quiet while we get started with our guests. Woo-woo. So I'm gonna spotlight Miss Gloria. Look at her.
Oh my goodness. I should have worked a little longer on this fro, I think, maybe.
Girl, you look fabulous. What are you talking about?
Love the fro. Love the fro.
We love, see, we got a round of applause for the fro.
A little rounder. Anyway.
Wow, we're so hard on ourselves as women. I do the same thing, so it's all good. But anyway, thank you so much, Gloria, for spending this time with us. I know that you're very busy, and Gloria and I are friends through Linda, and Gloria and I hope that we can recreate the natural conversations that we have today.
Yes.
I think that we can. Gloria is a woman of many trades, but we have her here today because I just love this book that she wrote. She Took Justice, and I'm going to drop the link in the chats for you to order her book. I'm telling you, I ordered it this morning. Shame on me. I should have ordered it before. But I'm glad I waited because she gave us a link that has 20% off and free shipping. So I encourage you, when I drop the link, order the book. So Gloria, let me do a quick bio about her. I told you all a lot about her, just a snippet about her on the link that I sent. But Gloria is a lawyer, a civil rights activist, a law professor, a radio talk show host, and she's an author, and she's a playwright. Like, really? Like, how many hats do you wear? Did I miss anything?
No, but I always like to say, and I'll say it very clearly here because I think people understand what I mean. I am trying to stay out of prison. So if you can think about all that I do, that's how mad I am. And I try to channel that rage into something positive. And so you see what I do. And now that's why I say you will understand that's how mad I am, that I have to not let this rage sit on my heart and my mind. I've got to put it somewhere. And that's what I like when I teach. And I teach at John Jay College. That's the other part. I teach constitutional law and racial law. And I try to tell young people to channel that rage into something positive and don't let it sit on your heart and your mind because it will mess you up. And we've all been through those time periods when it's messed us up, and we know how far down you can go if you let that rage weigh on you. So I figured out, hey, I've got to put it somewhere because it's not going away, but I can at least use it for something positive.
Well, I'm happy to say that you use it in a way that benefits all of us, because whenever I talk to you or listen to you, there's always some education. And Linda today will be co-hosting with me because, you know what was the program that, Linda, I was trying to remember the program that you were on with Gloria, because we broadcast it live for everybody here to hear. Was that Inauguration Day? Was that what it was?
Yeah, it was Inauguration Day. And Gloria was nice enough to invite me. I was so happy because I'm a groupie of hers. I'm a groupie, and my students are required. All my students, American government, criminal justice, paralegal studies, and whatever else I'm teaching, they were required to listen to her program and do a program summary and talk about the person who was interviewed and who put the money up behind that person, everything. So, and I have been listening to Gloria for years since she came on BAI. And then I saw her in Martha's Vineyard. I was like, wait, I gotta meet her so she'll know who this person is. It's like a group.
So let me read her bio real quick, and then we're going to get into discussion about the book and all kinds of other things. But I hope you all listened to the link that I sent you. Her interview with, what is it, the African American
National Civil Rights Museum.
National Civil Rights Museum. That's the one in Alabama?
In Memphis.
Oh, in Memphis. Okay, cool. But
yeah, they took the Lorraine Hotel and they turned it into a museum. It's really amazing what they've done.
Yeah, Memphis is one of my favorite cities. I've been there several times, and to the museum. I just get them mixed up. Because there's the one in
Alabama.
Birmingham. Yeah, we've done them all. So anyway, let me read your bio real quick, and then we're going to get into it. So Gloria Browne-Marshall is a professor of constitutional law at John Jay College, which is a part of CUNY. She was a law clerk in Philadelphia's Court of Common Pleas and the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. Professor Browne-Marshall is a civil rights attorney who litigated cases for the Southern Poverty Law Center, Community Legal Services Incorporated, and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Prior to John Jay College, she taught at Vassar College. Ms. Marshall Browne is the author of numerous articles as well as books. The one we'll talk about today, She Took Justice, The Black Woman, Law and Power, 1619 to 1969, Race, Law, and American Society, 1607 to present, The Voting Rights War, the NAACP, and the Ongoing Struggle for Justice, and the Constitution, Major Cases and Conflicts. She is a legal correspondent, and some of you have probably seen her on TV, covering the U.S. Supreme Court. She has given legal commentary on BBC, CNN, CBS, NPR, France 24, MSNBC, WBON, and you're also on the new Black Net. What is it called? Black
News Channel.
BIN.
The Black News Channel. I hope you all are checking that out. It's a new station that's just launched. And she hosts on WBAI Radio 99.5, Law of the Land. And you can find that at WBAI.org if you want to listen online. I'll put that in the chat as well. She is a member of Penn International, National Bar Association, Fellows of the American Bar Association, National Association of Black Journalists, the National Press Club, Dramatists Guild, and Authors Guild. She is a playwright. She did a play that I share with my students. We'll share that with you. And hopefully you'll love it. You'll love it. That's shot. I'll tell you about it in a minute. Her most recent stage plays include Dreams of Emmett Till, about Carolyn Bryant's accusations. That's the white woman that said Emmett whistled at her. that led to the brutal murder of a 14-year-old Emmett Till, and the play Shot Caught a Soul, about a Black teen haunting the white officer who shot him. That is really good. If anybody's teaching, you want to use it. I use it. My students love it. She is on the executive council of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, and chaired its 400th commemoration committee on the 1619 African arrival in Virginia. Ms. Brown has spoken to audiences in England, France, South Africa, Rwanda, Canada, Ghana, and presented an intervention before the Human Rights Commission on the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland, focused on racial disparities in America. And that's our guest. Woo!
Wait,
We're
Helen.
lucky to have her. Yes. What did I forget, Linda?
Two things. One, she's a specialist on the United States Supreme Court decisions. If you have any problem understanding those decisions, just text her or whatever, however she wants you to contact her, and you will understand these cases. And because of her, for my anniversary, we actually listened to a Supreme Court case. And the last thing, she also spoke in Newark, New Jersey. Huh. Okay.
Many times.
Thank you.
So, and I know it's not the Supreme Court, but it's the PA Supreme Court. And I know it's a controversial subject, but I would hope that you can help people understand the legalities of the Cosby case from a legal perspective. So that's just something else that we can talk about. But right now, I just want you to tell us about your book. I am just, taken with the subject. I think that, all these women heroes that we do not know, and some that we do know, but we didn't know certain things about. And just what inspired you to do it, and even the title. How'd you come up with the title?
Well, thank you so much. And thank you all for being here. The world is opening up. It's a beautiful day. To spend your time here with me this afternoon, I feel honored. So I thank you all very, very much.
Ditto here, because I appreciate you all being here. I love you all. I know you love when Black women gather, but I also know it's summer and people are outside. So thank every one of you for showing up. Thank you for saying that, Gloria.
Yeah, yes, of course. One thing I rarely say this in a public space, but I like being a Black woman.
Praise the Lord.
Every day, all day.
Yes,
Hey.
I like being a Black woman, and I always I think somebody's not muted.
Yeah, we need to mute somebody. I love your commentary, but who is it, guys? Do you see it? I don't see it.
Yeah.
So if you're on the phone, we can't mute you. We need you to mute your phone, please. Okay, go ahead, Ms. G.
Yeah, so I used to say that, and I wrote up my poem, Enjoying the Darkness, and I really would like to share that as well.
Please.
But I used to say that I feel like I was a Black woman for like lifetime after lifetime, if people believe in something like that. So I'm very comfortable in my Black woman's skin. I've never had like an issue about being female, issue about being Black. My issues are the way we're treated. Mm-hmm. And so I do, and I really believe that Black women have created their own mark in the world. When you say an African-American woman or a Black American woman or a Black woman, people understand that you're coming and you're gonna come fierce if you take her off the wrong way. Okay, and that she has her own personality and her own stance in the world, as opposed to other women who have their personalities, their part of the world is based on who their husbands are, where we have created our own place in the world. Now, having said all that, that doesn't make for a crystal stair at all. And I didn't have one, and I don't have one now, but I feel blessed and in the rocky and ups and downs that have come in my life. And some people know some of those ups and downs that came actually in the last years. So I was working on my first book, Race, Law, and American Society, 1607 to present. And I started my career off as a civil rights attorney. And I was traveling into these small towns in Alabama, Georgia, and I would be in these small towns, and they, of course, didn't have hotels, they had motels. And so at the end of the day, after meeting with my clients, I go to the motel, and there's nothing to do. There's not like there's a downtown, there's no place to go, everything is closed. And I started asking myself, and this is after meeting with some parents in a funeral home, And so because the leader in many communities was the person who was he had the funeral home, you know.
Yeah,
Something happened.
Yeah,
Her
someone
sound
just
went
muted me, but it's like, okay, I'm back.
yeah.
So you had these people who had power in their communities, but there was still always something they were subject to. No matter what we had, there's always some crushing oppression, some jealousy, some undermining. And so I went back and I was so frustrated. So I'm sitting in my motel and I was like, you know, how long have we been doing this? How long have we been fighting this battle? And so I began writing my book. And this is when I was practicing law full time and teaching part-time at Vassar. And so I was like, how long have we been doing this? And why is it that I'm teaching these classes at Vassar and they don't have a book that puts the struggle in it and the struggle across thing? Because there's a book on criminal justice, there's a book on education, there's a book, but this is a cross issue topic of oppression. This is not just in school and it's not just at work. And so I started working on my book, Race, Law, and American Society, 1607 to present, because as I went through, I found, okay, it wasn't just 1950s. Oh, it wasn't just the Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896. Oh, it went into the early 1800s. Oh no, I'm in the 1700s. Oh my goodness, now I'm in the 1600s. So that's why it's 1607 to present for my first book. And then as I'm researching this book, I find these Black women. And so I said, okay, they have to have their own book. I've never heard of these women. I didn't hear about these cases. And this is the thing about law, you know, because most people think about law, they think about Judge Judy, they think about Perry Mason, but law has philosophy to it. Law has so many broad spaces. And so one thing that I did was I started looking at law as a tool for oppression and a tool for uplift. And so law as a tool for oppression and a tool for uplift. And so as I'm researching my my book, the first one, Race, Law, and American Society, I'm finding these cases because law means that people have to write things down. And when they're writing it down, they're telling you history. They're telling you the values of the time, because law is just the codification of the values of people in power. And when you have power enough to get laws passed and you read those laws, you understand who had the power and who didn't have the power, and who had the power foisted on them because the people spoke. And so I would see this line would go up and go down, go up and go down. So you would have people actually moving forward and making history. And then you have the backlash. And I used to tell the people in civil rights, every time you go forward, prepare for the backlash. And they wouldn't listen to me. And I was basing this on history. So that's why, for example, you can have 2 terms of Obama and then get Donald Trump. So just know whether or not it's a small space, medium space, statewide, nationally, internationally, once you have some forward movement, then you have the backward motion. The other thing I found was this country rules by law and violence. Mm-hmm. Law and violence. Those 2 things are the recipe for this country's success. If there is unbridled law and the laws are corrupt, as long as you have the votes, you don't care what it does to anybody else. You have the votes, you make it happen. And then if people actually rise up and say, no, I'm not going to be traveled by this law, or this law is unfair, you see what happened in January 6th of this year, the violence. And this is what you've seen time and time again. I think it's been excellent public relations that this country has spent this much time lying to the world and itself, saying that it's the land of liberty. It was an outright lie. And I was actually on a panel for the National Archives. I was so excited. They invited me to speak on this panel with these historians about the Declaration of Independence for their program leading up to the 4th of July. I always ask people, did you watch what I've done before? I mean, because is anybody like looking this up on YouTube? You have a sense that I'm not going to fall within the program if you think I'm coming in here mealy mouthed and just going to follow the line of the Black elite. That's not me. You
I
know?
often say too, like, did you like Google me?
Yes. And so I'm on there. And of course, the last question is, well, why do people boast about the Declaration of Independence with now you said, because I had said what I have said, you know, when all you said, then why are people boasting about it? I said, I don't know. They must read only the first 3 paragraphs. So this is what I said. This audience on the National Archives. And so the other part that really got me about the Black women was that when I was reading about what these Black women have been through and what they're doing, somebody's got to mute.
Somebody is, okay, please mute.
Can you ladies help me keep everybody muted, please?
We are.
And even the people on the phone, if they're not muted, just go through and mute them. Thank you. Go ahead, Gloria, I'm sorry.
Okay, so when I saw these Black women, I knew that not only had they had to face laws and violence, they had to face the hypocrisy of watching them create a country on their backs. And so these Black women are just fierce. They knew what they were going up against. I mean, think about what we're dealing with today. And they started off in this sense of, and I begin the book in Africa, because I think it's so important for us to begin with government. And I've said this many times in all different types of forum, is that Africa had its own, I'm saying African is like people that, oh, it's a continent and it's like you're thinking about different countries. Okay, focus on Angola, which is where Queen Nzinga comes from. And I start with Queen Nzinga and the warrior queens. And the fact that they had their own government in Angola, they had their own structure. She had her father, the Angola, the king, who used to take all these heads of states from the different tribal regions. And we're talking about a region, some people have said, that could have been the size of Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. And this king ruled this region that we now call Angola. And Angola, the country right now, is smaller than the landmass that he ruled during that time period of 1583 when she was born. She died in 1663. And the reason why I started with Queen Nzinga was because not only did we have someone who became a queen, but she was so mysterious and so well trained as a diplomat. 1622, she sits down with the Portuguese governor and his men in their high-backed wooden chairs. They put a mat on the floor for her to sit on. A mat on the floor. And she's supposed to be negotiating a peace treaty with them, representing her country. Where was her brother, the king at the time? He thought they might kill him, so he sent his sister. Yep, and this happens quite a few times where the brothers wasn't there the way we think they should be sometimes, not all the time, but this was one of those instances where he sends his sister. Now, when his brother should have been learning, you know, how to use a spear and the knife and everything, he was playing. She was taking private lessons. Her father found out she was taking these lessons, realized that she was even better than her brother, and said it was okay for her to be trained outright. So not only was she there watching her father as his diplomatic skills were used and learning diplomacy, she also learned how to use the spear and the knife better than many of the men. And so when she met in 1622, she's a woman, African, adorned in gold, oiled body, and she appears before these Portuguese men sitting in their high back chairs in their woolen suits and all of these robes and everything burning up. And she's there in her robe and her gown and her fabrics that only the royalty can use. And there's a mat on the floor. And so with that, you know, she claps her hands. Her maid servants who had oiled her body earlier that day and prepared her for this know exactly what she needs, a stool. So they create a human chair for her. They put their hands down and kneel down, and she uses their backs for a chair to negotiate the peace treaty. That's what we are. And those Angolan men, women, and children are the 20 and odd Africans who arrive in 1619 into the Virginia colony, a colony that was just founded in 1607. So less than 20 years after the founding of the colony, here we are as Black women. And so when we go forward, we need to understand Europe didn't need to give us a form of government. We had government, we had skills. And I think what this book shows more than anything else is that we created our opportunities as often as we could. The more opportunities that we could gain, the further we could then express ourselves. And so therefore, you see us in these positions now, and as vice president, you see Michelle Obama, you see us in corporations and in education, you see us as politicians, you see us in doing all these roles, and prima ballerina to the Olympics. And we're doing all these things because we forced open the door and made ourselves a seat at the table. But that arc of time from Africa to here is not that they helped us create who we are. I want people to always know we already had it in us. And sometimes it's a matter of rediscovering us because it's been beaten down so far that we question what we have to offer as Black women. So I had to write this book. I even wrote another book, my Voting Rights War book. I wrote in the meantime because I was tired and nobody wanted this book. I'm sending around draft after draft. People are telling me, no, we don't want this book. Nobody has any interest in this book. And it's on Black women. And so I would get so discouraged. Then a friend of mine said, you know what, you're writing about these fierce Black women and here you are discouraged? That doesn't even make sense. So he said, you better get on it. And then these women, Queen Nzinga, and these fierce women, they would be like coming in, haunting me. Like, what's wrong with you? Get on the ball, come on. And so they would not let me rest. I wrote this book and kept shopping it around for years until I finally found a publisher. And so that's where I am today, with She Took Justice. And then I'll let Helen ask a question, then I'll tell you how I came up with She Took Justice.
Yeah, so now that you say that, who are your favorite women that you uncovered in the book? Like I loved, I forget the young lady's name. I think it was Celia, who killed the man who had raped her at the age of 16. Like, really? And then I don't think a lot of women know about the Mississippi appendectomy. So if you can just tell about some of who are your favorite characters. I mean, not even characters. They're not. We are not characters.
These are like real subjects. Yeah. That's the thing that I thought was actually going to be the selling point. I really thought that publishers would really want, to know about real live women who had really made their mark and then been made to disappear because law is written down. Even because I have to tell you this, I really don't have a social life. People think I have, they kind of input one into my world, but I really don't have one. And so what I do is actually for vacation, I go down to Williamsburg, Virginia, and I study colonial legal history for a week. Yes, that's what I do. And in Williamsburg, they have like all these sites and all these things like, these giant amusement parks. Haven't been to any of them. I go to the former slave villages and plantation houses and down to the archives and all of that. And that's where I read the law that was passed. Because when the Africans arrived in August of 1619, just the month before, they had just created their legislative body. And the legislative body was made up of landholders who were growing tobacco. And tobacco, as some of you know, is a very labor-intensive crop. And so they needed the labor, and they didn't have enough white indentured servants, white slaves basically, who worked for free for a number of years until their contract ended. Those people were covered by the laws of Parliament in England. The Africans, what they figured out, the white people, colonists in Virginia, was that since the Africans weren't covered by any of these European laws, they could be treated anyway. They could create their own laws to treat them and to base them. And that's what they did, so that they could work them for perpetuity. But they didn't do it all at once. It was like little incremental times. So we have Mary and Anthony Johnson. an African couple who had land of their own, freedom of their own, and European as well as African servants in the 1600s, Mary and Anthony Johnson, Angolan Africans with European servants. And what do? The legislative body, the House of Burgesses, passes a law that says no Africans could have a European servant. So every time there was 2 steps forward, the pushback. And that's why I'm saying it's through law and violence. By 1669, they have enacted a law that says that the killing of an African by a European would not be a felony. 1669, that's how long they've been killing us with impunity. They created this law in 1669. So in the meantime, you have these women like Mary Johnson, but I also like to talk about the 3 African descendant witches, who were accused of witchcraft. So during the Salem witch trials, there were 3 Black witches during the Salem witch trials.
Who knew that? Not
Yes.
me. Yeah.
So they're my favorites in a way, because, and it's like, this is what I like about this book. If you're ever having a bad day, pick up the book and turn to any page, you go like, well, my day is really not that bad. Okay. The other thing is, you can always go find one of them that will make you go, okay, yeah, I can do this. So sometimes I think about these Salem witches, accused, alleged witches, because here they are accused of witchcraft. And this makes me my favorite sometimes, because they saw the white women accused of witchcraft by these little white girls who just like, they said, oh, they could be celebrities. They don't have to work. All they have to do is accuse people of witchcraft. And they're like the celebrities of Salem. And so they took this so far that people were hanged. Over 50 people were hanged because of these little white girls who were like trying to get off their work. And so here we have these Black women watching the white women getting hanged when they accuse them of witchcraft. Now remember, law is written down. So in the book, I actually have partial transcripts from the trials where they're asking these women, are you a witch? Here we have Candy. So Candy says, Candy, question, Candy, are you a witch? Answer, Candy no witch in her country. Candy's mother no witch. Candy no witch Barbados. This country, mistress gave Candy witch. So what she said was, you know what, I'm not a witch, but if there is a witch here, she did it.
Right. And that's the same thing they did with the religion of voodoo. It made out to be, and Santeria, all of that. They have made it out to be the taboo religions, not even religions, with witchcrafts or things of that.
Yes, but all 3 witches live.
Oh, good.
Now, that's why I'm saying that's amazing. I might write a separate story just on those 3 witches. I might write a play about it, or something, because it's just amazing that if she was like, I wasn't a witch. My mother wasn't a witch. I wasn't a witch in Barbados when you came and got me. So if I'm a witch now, she did it.
Right. Love it. And did you have any inkling before doing your research that there were Black women involved in the part of the Salem witch hunt?
I just knew about Tituba because she's the one who was playing with the children in the woods. And then one little girl got sick and they started having all these sermons around Satan and the devil is everywhere. And then they said, oh, she must be possessed. And this woman, Tituba, must have done it. And so, but I didn't know about the other 2. That's amazing. And jump through time, I love Mum Bet. Mum Bet, here's this Black woman enslaved in the 1780s. This is during the time the Constitution was drafted in 1787. And so here we have the Constitution being drafted, Declaration of Independence, all of this being drafted in the presence of enslaved African men and women and children. So Mum Bet says, wait a minute, I'm hearing you talk about freedom. So back then, most people were illiterate. So that's why you would have the town crier. The guy would go in the middle of the town square and read off the proclamation because most people, Black, white, and whomever, could not read. And so she's doing her shopping and she's listening to them yell, these are the liberties, whatever. She's at home listening to them talk about this. Her owner is someone who's very high up in the Ashley family, very well known. He had served in the military and all of that. But his wife, Anjanette, his wife was beating, yes, Mom Bet's little sister. And so what really happened that got Mom Bet was that Mom Bet, when your sister had a little crust of bread and she was hungry, and so she was like off of one of the plates, so everybody else had eaten, and she took this little crust of bread and she ate it, and then the slave mistress turned around and saw her and said, "How dare you steal from me?" Now remember, we're all working for free. You know, "How dare you steal from me?" And picks up this hot poker, red hot poker, and throws it at the little sister of Mom Bet.
Wow.
Mom Bet, as the older sister, puts her arm up to shield her little sister, and it hits her right on the arm, and they said, "Down to the white meat." Now, this is described. That's how I know about these. I'm not making it up. These are the actual cases. Mom Bet gets a fever and infection. She goes to bed. They think she's going to die. She lives. But when she finally gets strong enough to start service again at one of the dinner parties that her mistress is giving, she refuses to bandage her arm, and it's a gash and it's ugly. And she's serving things. And then the mistress is like, "Oh, go cover that up. Nobody wants to see this." And Mom Bet says, "No, they need to see what you did." So when Mom Bet is out and she hears a proclamation about these liberties, she goes where? To a lawyer. She walks into a law office, she hires an attorney, and she says, "What about all these freedoms you're talking about? I want to be free." And so the attorney takes the case. They bring a lawsuit against the Ashley family, and they use the Massachusetts Constitution as the foundation for her freedom. And she wins her lawsuit. They add a man to the lawsuit because they said, "We just can't do this in the name of a woman."
Right.
So they go find an enslaved African male and they put his name on there too. And that's the lawsuit that she wins. And in 1781, you're here, they're looking at this going, "Oh my goodness." And by 1791, she's living somewhere for free, not live for free, but she's paying rent, but she's being paid. She decides to work for the lawyer that she was living with, who represented her case. She'd been living with him since she left the Ashley residence. And so when I think about her, I think about how much that's so exciting to know that she existed, but also that she said, and she's quoted on her gravesite as saying that if she never gained her freedom except for 1 minute, for 1 minute of freedom, she was willing to die after that 1 minute just to be free. So that she's another one. And last one I'll tell you is last two, Daisy Bates. You talking about a fierce woman in Little Rock, Arkansas. She's the one who shepherded, the Little Rock Nine into desegregating Central High School. But she also was fierce in her own right. And she was somebody who wanted a life that she was not able to have. She found out as a child that her people she was living with weren't really her parents, that her mother had been gang raped and murdered, her body thrown into the pond that this little girl had been walking by all this time. And then she found out that was a pond where they had killed her mother. And then once that happened, her father walked her over to some relatives and left. And so she found out at 9 years old that the world she thought she had was gone, and she had to recreate a world of her own. And from there, she decided she's not going to step back. She became a journalist. She became a civil rights activist and was sued many times and threatened with jail and was jailed many times, had, bottles thrown in her window. Her house was set on fire 2 or 3 times, cross burned in Little Rock, Arkansas. And of course, Fannie Lou Hamer, she was the victim of that appendectomy, the Mississippi appendectomy, where they would actually take women and tell them they're getting some other type of procedure and actually give them a hysterectomy. And so for years, she was wondering why she could never get pregnant. And she didn't find out until later in life, after she had been a sharecropper and found out she had voting rights and started voting, was arrested and beaten in a jail cell. And how they did it back then, they would go find a Black man, and then either somebody who was an actual prisoner or someone who was working for them, and they would use the black man to beat the woman. And so the white folks would sit back and beat her some more, hit her on the head, do this. And they beat her so bad that they said that her life was shortened by the beating she received that day. But, and she, of course, was the one who was famous for saying, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And that goes back to our politicians. Instead of us being out there always, protesting about laws after they're enacted, I beg of you to please require your politicians to tell you when bad laws are being created so that we can stop it in its tracks, bring attention to it for our communities. Don't wait, and if you find politicians have waited, because I had one politician tell me when I asked him, why is it that you don't tell us when they're creating these laws if you're in the room when this happening? And he said, oh, then they wouldn't let me in the room. So those are, and there's so many more, but those.
Let me ask you. So the rumor is that it was learning of her, Fannie Lou Hamer learning of her having been sterilized that drove her to become the activist. Is that right? And
I've heard it both ways.
And how did she find out?
Because she went to actually find out. She went to a doctor to find out why she wasn't getting pregnant. And that's when she found out that she had been sterilized. And remember, the U.S. Supreme Court for many years has supported sterilization. The case of Buck versus Bell was a Supreme Court case, and these were white people. But there are also North Carolina cases in which, and they went up into the 1970s, which goes to my next book, which is going to be for this book goes up to 1969. My next book is 1970 to present. That's going to talk about, what we did with the power that we took. So, but Fannie Lou Hamer, was.
And that's an ongoing issue. Those women in North Carolina are still waiting to be made whole. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, what they were doing was they were saying to people who were on public assistance, if someone got pregnant and they were on public assistance, especially if it was a single Black mother or woman, they would say, everyone is going to be pushed out of public housing and no one's going to receive any public assistance unless you have a hysterectomy.
Right.
That's what the social workers were presenting to these girls and women. And so, of course, they didn't want to see their whole families displaced and, and not have food on the table. So many of these girls and women underwent hysterectomies based on a law that was allowing this to happen in North Carolina. And that law didn't really end, until the 1970s, they claim, but then they found that there are certain places they were still doing it because the women didn't know that it was illegal.
So women, and I know you have a question, but before you move away from the women, can you please tell, I love Celia, and can you tell how Celia got busted? Because I think that speaks volumes as well.
Yeah, so Celia represented to me, and every one of these women were hundreds and thousands of other women, because African women became the foundation for the economy, the slave economy. Under the Constitution, the slave trade ended in 1808, but slavery did not end. And so how are they going to now create more product of human beings if they can't import people from Africa? So they decide they're going to start using the Black woman's body as a vessel for procreation for product, enslaved people. So it was in the 1600s that they created a law that said the status of the child of an enslaved woman would take that enslaved woman's status. So these children, babies are enslaved in vitro before they are born. If their mother is enslaved, then they are enslaved at birth, their first breath, they are slaves. So now we have into the 1808 until 1865, they're taking the Black woman and using her as this breeder. And they're even taking classes. There are conferences on how to breed a Black woman without killing her, because now she's not valuable if she's dead. So you have these women, Black women, being bred on the one hand, working in the field or in the house, but also being used as concubines. And so all of this is happening at the same time. And so this concubine status that Black women had was something that white women pretended they didn't see, even though you would see these babies that looked just like the master who was being born. And many times they were only maybe a month apart. And so I think that's somebody else's. You have to watch that. And so what we have here is that these women, Celia being one of them, girls actually, we're in Missouri, in Fulton, Missouri. And so here we have Celia purchased by Robert Newsom, who at this time is in his 60s. And so he purchases her and on the way home rapes her just to make sure she knows what her duties will entail. So he buys or builds this little hut.
How old is she at that time?
16.
16.
He buys or builds this hut that he puts on the edge of the plantation, his plantation. So that Mom wants to on the edge of his plantation so that he could have easy access to her. He's got 2 daughters, and she is the only female enslaved person on the plantation. So he's raping her on a regular basis at night. She's working in the field all day long, and she begins to have these babies. And she's like, you know, I can't take this. But it becomes worse because she falls in love. Because we're talking, that's why I think it's hard for us to grapple with the fact that we're dealing with human beings, full-fledged human beings. We didn't become human beings with feelings now. We had feelings then too, even if we couldn't express them. And so she falls in love with another enslaved person, a man on the plantation. Robert Newsom sees the 2 talking together and gets jealous. He's got the nerve, right? He's got the nerve. Gets jealous. Comes to them while they're standing there. I'm coming to your room tonight. I'm coming to see you tonight. Says it in front of the young man, just so everybody knows who belongs to whom. And so that night, she's waiting for him because the young man has said to her, you're going to have to choose. It's either him or me. So she's been all day thinking about this. And of course, here he comes at night, Robert Newsom. He walks in and she says, no, I don't want to do this anymore. No, stop. Of course, she's property. He keeps going. She picks up a log off the fireplace and she hits him once with it. And then again and again and again. And he falls to the ground and she bashes his head in. And then she realizes, of course, he's dead. So then she goes, what am I going to do? She gets an axe and she chops up his body in little pieces. And then she burns the body in the fireplace. She takes the ashes from the fireplace and she buries the ashes out behind this little hut that he's built for her, that he's been using to see that to come there and rape her. The next morning, his daughters are like, where's our father? Then everybody starts looking for Robert Newsom. He's gone missing. So they go to Celia. They're like, Celia, do you know Robert Newsom? Nope. You know anything about his missing? Nope. Okay. They look all around and they go to the young man. And they ask the young man, do you know anything about the fact that Robert Newsom is missing? And he says, no, but I go back and ask Celia. She might know. He then, of course, is the one that sends them back to Celia. They say to Celia, you know, these white men who are looking with the daughters and everybody's staring at her. He thinks there's something you're not telling us. And so when she realizes that he has betrayed her, she confesses. Now, remember, there's no body. There's no evidence. They didn't have DNA back then and all of that. So there is no evidence to say that she did it outside of her confession. They arrest her. She's tried for first-degree murder. Under the law, a woman has a right of self-defense. She has a right to protect herself. However, as early as 1680 in Virginia, they have taken away the right of self-defense from all people of African descent and all Native Americans as well. There is no right of self-defense. In a court of law, you would be able to at least have a chance to tell your side of the story. Laws had been passed, no person of color, Asian, African, Latino, no person of color can testify against a white person. No person of color can be on a jury in which a white person has anything to do with the case. So can she at least say it was self-defense? She has no right of self-defense. She has no right of womanhood. And they actually, in the newspaper articles I read, they actually went so far to say he was doing what he had a right to do, but they would never talk about what it was he was doing, and that she was supposed to obey his every command. And so these white men, many of whom were slaveholders, find her guilty and sentence her to death by hanging. And she was hanged. And before she died, she said, "I didn't mean to kill him. I just wanted him to stop." That was Celia in the 1850s.
Well, I'm glad she killed him, and sorry that she died, but it was for a good cause, you know? And of course, they made her out to be less than human, I'm sure. Well, you know, we were property. So and then this is where your thing comes in, chattel slavery. So we had no rights, and we still have no rights. Just this week, I wrote a piece on a white guy was talking horrible about the Bill Cosby thing and, you know, all kinds of rapists he is. And I asked him, I posed a question to him, have you ever wondered why it is that Black people come in all these different shades, from deep, sexy chocolate to, you know, damn near white? And of course, you know, I was reminding him that his forefathers, like, this is the history that they don't know, which gets to what Linda wants to talk about, the history that they don't want taught, that we were just raped, you know, and we had no say in it. White women, I mean, Black women are not overwhelmingly attracted to white men now, and surely we were not then. So it's just very interesting. So,
but I want to say this is one of the reasons why we have also conflicts between Black women and white women.
Absolutely.
It's because these white women like the daughters, white women like the slave mistresses, you know, not only were they tormenting us, but they knew what these men were doing. And I'll read this one short section from my book. There was no sanctuary for the Black woman in the arms of white women. Celia had turned to Newsom's daughters, Virginia and Mary, to protect her against the rapes. White females were dependent on their male relatives, fathers and brothers, for financial assistance. There is no record of Newsom's daughters assisting Celia. Robert Newsom had a reputation as a good family man. Given all this, his daughters may have stayed quiet, feeling helpless in the face of the unspeakable acts of their father. So whether or not it was the father, it was the son, it was the grandfather, it was the husband, all of these attacks were taking place. As a matter of fact, it was one of those things where when a young white man came of age, or a young boy of 17, 18, they sent him over to rape a Black woman so that he could get his practice in before he actually got married and had to do all these things as a married man. So, and those are the rapes when you see Racy Taylor, in her case, that was the first case in which a Black woman who was gang raped actually had her case before court. The first time, and that was in the 1950s, the first time. So I ask again, where were the prosecutors all of this time? And I know Black prosecutors, you know, get upset with me because they're like, oh, you're putting all of us, lumping all of us together. It's like, come on, be real. If you're going into a different profession that has a reputation, then you know that that reputation of not addressing Black issues and over prosecuting Black people is going to be something that you have to carry as well. You know, we just had a Black prosecutor in the Breonna Taylor case. And what happened with that? He lied and said that he had presented this issue to the grand jury and failed to get an indictment when it was just a bald-faced lie. And because the grand jury system is one in which you cannot say under oath what it is that's happened under penalty of perjury, a penalty of criminal action, those grand jurors came out and they could have gone to jail for revealing that this Black prosecutor did not even present the evidence, but they said, we have to tell. Think about how often this is going on. So this is not just a Black-white thing. This is about prosecutors not doing their jobs. Black women were lynched, and we have the pictures of the people who were lynching them or co-conspirators with all these, postcards and all these photographs. Where were the prosecutors? Why weren't
Gloria,
there any investigations?
Gloria, I'm struck that Celia was tried and rather than just outright lynched. Do you have any comments on that?
Yes. Here's what some people thought. Some people in certain regions said there were two ways this is going to happen. You're going to have a trial to show we're civilized, because there were slave tribunals, and these slave tribunals, freedom courts, where some people actually won their freedom. That's in the book too. So it was only when it was guaranteed the person was going to be hanged. So in order to look civilized, to look like, okay, we're not just rowdy people, because white folks actually looked down on lynching. They thought it was a common white people who carried out this brutality. And so they would actually have a trial and then hang the person, but you weren't getting out alive. And there were cases in which if the person was, and these are the cases that you find in my book on race, law, and American society, where you have cases in which a Black man actually appealed and won his case before the US Supreme Court. They went in and were appalled. It's like, how dare you? How dare you win your freedom? We thought we were going to give you a dignified death, but if you want to die by lynching, we'll do that too. So those were the two ways. Every now and then they would say, we want to show to the white world that we're not barbarians. We're going to give you a trial, but the result was going to be death.
There's a book, you mentioned Reese Taylor. There's a book by a white professor, I think she is, and her theory is that it wasn't that Rosa Parks was tired of riding in the back. It was Reese Taylor's case. She was tired of Black women being raped, gang raped, and that actually it was Reese Taylor's rape that led to Rosa Parks' decision, I guess aided by the NAACP at that point, that led to her getting on the bus and saying, I'm not moving. What do you think about that theory?
Yeah, well, most people know of Rosa Parks from Montgomery, but Rosa Parks's father was a Garveyite. And, he was an activist and she was a Garveyite. And so she became secretary for the NAACP. And that was a very controversial position to be in at the time. We might think about now, it's like, oh yeah, we want this, to be in the organization. Back then, that was to put your life and livelihood in jeopardy. And she was investigating Racy Taylor's rape. Racy Taylor was coming from church after choir practice one night, and she's with other people, and they're walking home. And so, and this is in a small town in Alabama, and these white men come by,
Abbeville,
and they actually come in and with gunpoint say, oh, we heard that you're in trouble. And they take her away at gunpoint. And so as soon as they take her away, the people she was with run to her father, because you couldn't trust the sheriff because they're all in on this. And they run to her father and they try to tell her father what happened, that she had been kidnapped by these white men. They gang raped her. And this goes back to this whole idea of concubines and what they thought of Black women from the slave period. They would throw $1 down on the ground after the rape and say, she's a prostitute. That's the money she asked for. And this was done time and time again without any recourse, without any criminal consequences. And Racy Taylor was married at the time and was a mother, and she, with her husband's support, she decided to go to the sheriff and her father with her, and they actually reported this as a crime. And so it was the NAACP who decided to look into it, and Rosa Parks, who was the investigator for the NAACP, who went to that town and asked questions and put, once again, her life in jeopardy by investigating this rape and pushing toward, justice. And this is how the Montgomery bus boycott had its foundation, because those Black women came together and had a national effort around Racy Taylor. a national effort. And so that's how they became these grassroots organizers around the issues of civil rights in Montgomery. It was based on the Racy Taylor case. And so when Montgomery, Alabama became, the epicenter with Martin Luther King of the civil rights movement, all those women were already in place. The whole, machine was in place. All they needed now was the Montgomery bus boycott, and the machine went into action. But Black women had been grassroots organizers from the 1800s when they were suffragettes trying to get the right to vote, going into this time period when white women would not allow them to be a part of their movement as suffragettes. So they had already, like Ida B. Wells Barnett and so many, already established organizations. They had been a part of community service. They knew that the government was not going to give the Black communities the services they needed. And so these Black women were the ones who created, the tutoring programs at night, giving food to the elderly, all these things that were needed, the Black women's organizations and the churches were doing. And so at this point, the churches, the Black women who were pivotal to the creation of movements within the church become that engine that creates the Montgomery bus boycott. And it was the boycott, as well as the cases that go to the Supreme Court, that crushed segregation on the public buses in Montgomery. Not just the boycott itself, those women and their structure and what they did by refusing to ride the buses and economically fighting that battle, but also the legal battle was before the US Supreme Court. And people know that Claudette Colvin, the little Black girl, was the first one before Rosa Parks who was arrested. But it was found later that Claudette Colvin was pregnant, and she was pregnant by a married man, Black man, a married man. And so, and she's 16 years old. But one of the things that always struck me when they were dragging her off the bus, because she was one of the young ones who said she wouldn't give up her seat on the bus, and they're dragging her away, and she screams out, "I have constitutional rights." And she said this at 16, before there were constitutional classes or anything like that. She knew she had a constitutional right to be in that seat on that bus. And so Claudette Colvin ended up actually spending the rest of her life in New York City, and at the end of her life, moving down to Georgia.
I didn't know it was, I knew she was pregnant, but I didn't know it was by a married man. But I knew that because she was pregnant is why they didn't use her as the face of it.
Yeah, they felt they needed to have someone who was outstanding and beyond reproach in the community.
Right. Yeah.
Also, though,
they were definitely strategic.
I wanted to say something. Sorry, I wanted to say something.
Go ahead, Alyssa.
Based on, because you said that the white women didn't allow Black women into the women's suffrage, even though they shared a similar plight, but economically, socially, and politically, white women had no value. They had no work ethics. They didn't do anything for themselves. So even though Black women were labeled as slaves or were enslaved, because that's not what they were, that was just a title, they still had work ethics, and that was something more than what they had. That's why they were jealous too. And the men were sleeping with the Black women.
But also the other part of that is that these were free Black women as well who were trying to be a part of it. Remember I said Mary and Anthony Johnson were free and Angolan Africans in the Virginia colony. So there have always been a free community, and they became free by three ways. One, they became free in the very beginning, and then generation after generation, actually, they became free. Second, they were fugitives. And I don't even like the word fugitive because that means they committed a crime. Because back then, freedom was a crime, slavery was the law. So when they ran away, they gained their freedom. Third was by manumission. Manumission meant many times white men, because women couldn't own property at the time, all property was owned by men, brothers, uncles, sons, fathers, husbands, and these white men on their deathbeds, thinking they're going to go to hell, would then free their enslaved Africans. And so that's how that manumission worked. They would be manumitted. So you had these populations of Africans. And remember that New York, for example, ended slavery in the early 1800s in this gradual, process. So you had these places, and like as far up as Maine and New Hampshire, where Massachusetts, for example, where they started to have, manumission or outright legal freedom of people of African descent. So when you get to 1848, when the white women met in upstate New York in Seneca Falls, New York, Frederick Douglass is there. Frederick Douglass at this time is married to, that's his first wife is black. His second wife is white. So Frederick Douglass is there in Seneca Falls.
Her name was Helen. That woman was named Helen.
Yes. And so Frederick Douglass is there. Frederick Douglass is the one who tells the white women when they meet at that convention in 1848, he's the one that tells them to go for voting rights. They didn't have voting rights on their declaration initially. They were just talking about equality. And Frederick Douglass said, without voting rights, you have no equality. So it was a black man that actually told the white women to even go for voting rights. And then the white women turn around and deny black women access to be a part of their groups, which of course doesn't stop us. But it gives us this speech by Sojourner Truth, who is in my book with 4 different lawsuits. Sojourner Truth brought 4 different lawsuits and won every one of them. And Sojourner Truth is the one in Akron, Ohio in 1851 who gives that speech, Ain't I a Woman, to these white women who are proclaiming their rights and then don't want black women to be a part of it. And that's why she says, Ain't I a Woman? And there are certain people who've said, she actually said, Aren't I a woman? But they tried to turn it into this vernacular to fit what some white woman has dictated to be the speech.
You know, the other thing
now. You got me excited. Okay.
No, I'm loving it. But the other thing that I wrote about last week, which you also had, I put in the chat an article that Gloria wrote about the judicial system. So please make sure, and it ties right into what she's saying about who's writing the law. But the other thing that was,
please read it, and please, if you could put my book link back in the chat.
I did.
That would be great. But and also the link to this article I wrote about the prosecutors that was published by Bloomberg Law. And it's short. It really is. It's an op-ed piece. It's short. It has links to it to different places that you can actually see what I'm talking about. But I also I want people to know I'm not anti-prosecutors, but I believe we need criminal justice reform. And right now, no criminal justice reform actually involves the prosecutor's office. So my Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, hey, that's my sorority. My girl's in the White House, Kamala Harris. But I've got some issues with her as a former prosecutor, attorney general for California, that you would sponsor this legislation and not include anything about the role of prosecutors. It doesn't matter what the law is. And I'm gonna make this so clear, and somebody can help me make it clearer, please, because I've been working on this for years and I've been struggling trying to get this point out. And Linda knows I say it on my show all the time. If you have a law, it's a criminal law, and prosecutors refuse to prosecute, it doesn't matter what the law is.
It does not matter.
So you can have the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, you can have, the Emmett Till law, you can have these laws. But if the prosecutors refuse to do their jobs, it doesn't matter. And I always like to give this example. You could have a street light, and the street light's red and people drive through it. If there are no criminal consequences, how many people are actually going to stop? So we can't stop these police by just having a law if the prosecutors are not going to prosecute them. And if you remember with Derek Chauvin, when they showed him, when he was first convicted, they put the handcuffs on and everybody looked at the handcuffs. Think about when he was sentenced. You didn't see any handcuffs. They literally let that man stand up in a suit. Anybody else would have been in a jumpsuit because they were incarcerated. Yes, he stands up, no shackles, no handcuffs, buttons his jacket and is escorted out like he's the king of Egypt. And I'm like looking at this going, this is so against the policy of law enforcement. They're supposed to put handcuffs on him immediately. But once again,
Gloria, if you go back to Jeffrey Dahmer, I don't know that we ever saw, and Jeffrey Dahmer did heinous things. I mean, he was eating human beings and killing young Black boys, and he was treated with kid gloves. I don't know if ever we saw him in handcuffs and shackles and the whole bit, as we would have a Black defendant. Maybe once I can think of it, but as a rule, he was in court. He had on an orange jumpsuit, but he was treated with the utmost civility. And the thing that I will...
And who decides who gets to wear a suit? How is he wearing a suit and he's not in an orange jumpsuit? I mean, just like, I just look at this going, they broke their own rules again, and you saw nothing happen to these police officers.
Somebody needs to mute. I just want to jump in.
Oh, go ahead, Linda. I'm sorry.
All right, just to go back for a second, Gloria, when you were talking about the breeding, what people may not know is the number of children that these women were having. It became so profitable to breed people that some people left certain areas of, they just stuck with the breeding. They didn't even engage in the plantation anymore because it was so profitable to breed. The other thing, and I haven't read your book, I'm sorry, but there's a story, I don't know if she's in your book or not. It's about how people got military pensions. There was a Black woman who brought that lawsuit. She couldn't read, and her husband had served time in the Civil War, and she actually brought a lawsuit that allowed other people to get a pension today. And so people don't know that. But this all goes back to the critical race theory that everybody's having a fit about right now. And everything you're talking about are things
Not
that,
everybody, white people.
No, that's not true.
I take that back. You're right. You're right.
A lot of Black people have no idea. And at the end of the day, critical race theory is basically AKA making sure that we don't continue the myths and illusions of American and world history as it's shaped. And what we have, I was looking at Carol Anderson's book. This is all response to white rage, and the Heritage Foundations is pumping a lot of money into this whole, make people scared so that their white children will not know the real deal about this country. So if you could speak to that, because everything you said is part of what we should know anyway.
Laura, also speak from the legal perspective. What is the true foundation of critical race theory? And it has nothing to do with what they're all opposing right now.
Well, I want to first touch on what was raised by Linda about reparations. Callie House. And Callie House is in my book. She's on page 103. Callie died later. House was an intense competitor as a girl. Callie House, a widow, mother, and former slave, sought reparations for slavery in the early 1890s. So she not only brought created this organization called the National Ex-Slave Mutual Relief, Bounty, and Pension Association. An association was a membership association that at one time had over 300,000 members. And so with this, she of course brought the ire of the federal government, because who are we to actually have a pension and start demanding pension? And so she then gets arrested for fraud, very much what happened with Marcus Garvey. She gets arrested for fraud, and she's sentenced to the penitentiary. Sentenced to the penitentiary. She's one of the first women to actually go to the federal penitentiary. So this is but I want people to understand this. When you have that debate around reparations, this is not new. She started this debate right after slavery happened. She started to have a pension fund to create money to give to people. Think about it. What do you think happened to the enslaved Africans who had arthritis in their hands and couldn't work? What happened to the women whose bodies were broken down by being bred? What happened to the children born with disabilities? What happened to the people who got cancer? No one's talking about that. And in my other book I'm working on, I speak to these issues, because we need to understand there was no old age home. Even Harriet Tubman used to use her house as a place for formerly enslaved people to actually go to when they were old. She used it that way. I actually went up to, Auburn, New York, to visit her gravesite and to visit the home of Harriet Tubman. And what I try to do with a lot of the people in my book is actually go to these places. I went up to Salem, Massachusetts, and walked around Salem where they had the witch trials, so that I can really understand and feel, some connection to what was going on. So when we get to critical race theory began with Kimberly Crenshaw's take on it. But even before that, Kimberly Crenshaw was a professor at Yale Law School. But we also had other people who said, I have stories about my experience as an African American. I want to tell my story, whether or not my story is about my hair, it's about my experience, but it's this experiential. It's about experience. Before it was even about law, it was about what is it like living day to day as a Black person. And so those stories were gathered up, not just for, and I'm going to say this, and I don't mean this with any disrespect for anybody else's, we have another need to mute. For anybody else's position on these issues, I write in order to empower my people, my community. Some people write to explain us to white people. I believe in empowering us. They can read it too. And I've said this to some white people. It's like you're smart enough to get this. You're just not the main focus of my work. I want us to understand us. And then they can read it too, and they can understand as well. So critical race theory, in a way, I think began with us trying to understand our own experiences. And then it became, okay, now we're focused on white people understanding our experiences. And so then the law becomes a part of it, because law is a part of everything we do. Every single thing we do. From the stop sign that you see when you're walking down the street, to the exit sign inside the building, to how many people can occupy a particular space, to how many people you can have living in your apartment, to what the Food and Drug Administration says about your groceries. Everything we do has law involved in it. Even what kind of pet you can have. You want to have a goat? You can't have one, but you can have a dog. You know, you can't have a wolf. Okay, so all these things are part of law.
And that's why when they talk about this racial reckoning, there is no reckoning unless you deal with the legal system.
Unless you deal with the legal system.
Because they write the laws, they're the legislators that write the laws, they're the prosecutors that enforce the laws. I mean, they are the law, and they write laws in favor of their own agenda. So unless we're willing to deal with that, I don't know how we move forward.
And I think that's why empowering us to know the power of law that's been used as a tool of oppression more than a tool of uplift throughout history. And that's why I said it goes up and then there's a backlash. Then it goes up again, another backlash. But you have to have the 2 steps forward, because the 1 step back is going to come. And so with those 2 steps forward, you're making the progress. And you have to look for the way law is going to be used or abused to try to keep us from advancing. And you'll see it. Once you know this, it's like it's going to be your superpower.
Exactly. Gloria, you mentioned that you have a poem, and we want to open it up for questions, but could you please read your poem to us first? And then we're going to open it up to questions. Then Linda, please jump in. I know I'm talking too much, but please.
Oh, I'm talking too much. You got me so.
Oh, you're great. I'm loving it. I think everybody else is, because we still got over 80 women on this call. So thank you, ladies.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
And there are quite a few questions in the chat. So if my co-host can help me get through that so we can make sure to ask everybody's questions, that would be great. But go ahead. Let's hear your poem.
Okay, my poem is titled Enjoying the Darkness. Enjoying the darkness. I was a Black woman when the Nile was young, and the lush grass of the savannah cooled my smooth brown legs. Banana trees shaded my bold ebony eyes, and I loved all of me. I was a Black woman before it was called Africa. In Timbuktu, the men charted the stars and the boys proved their manhood, all to gain a glimpse of my smile and hear my words, well done. I was a Black woman when the day was led by the night. Only honor shielded my breasts and smoldering triangle, shaped to chase praise and make life, and then to become time-worn friends. I was a Black woman, but neither queen nor servant. My status stood as secure as defender of our female sanctity and bearer of our holy wrath. We were she who will be obeyed. I was a Black woman when the foreign men came with their heathen children and stole our sacred ones, plunging into us their icy manhood and malice, but never reaching our divinity. I will always be a Black woman, hiding my antiquity behind slang, Mother Earth and Sister Sun, writer of psalms, lover of tranquility, warrior, teacher. I am the maker of new destinies. I am the aged Black woman, holding hard onto clouds until my drum slows to a blessed silence, weeping in the night. Wait, look for me, singing deep and loud a new old song. For I am born a Black girl child, fresh with the power of my existence, growing firm into the wonder of my full self, a Black woman with each eon and iteration, enjoying the darkness.
Wow, is that in print? Where do we find that?
That's in my other book.
She got a book for every occasion.
But I also put Enjoying the Darkness in the back of She Took Justice. So you can find it there as well. And each of the different chapters I have as chapter headings a part of Enjoying the Darkness.
And I would just add, Helen, I would just add that one of the things we didn't talk about Gloria, and which she kind of said, she does a report on Black women and girls that is also available to people. You didn't say that, Gloria.
Oh, Black. I'm sorry.
She got too much going on, Linda. Come on.
Yeah, she just released the report in 2020, right?
Yes. So I don't have it with me, or do I? No, I don't have it over here. Sorry. I can show you that.
You can put it in the chat.
Okay.
And I want to give a shout out to Linda's cousin Kim, because Gloria, she went online and bought your hardcover.
Whoa, thank you. I can eat tonight.
Thank you, Miss Kim.
I appreciate you.
So let's open this up to questions. You know, the other thing that I wanted to say about this, I wrote earlier this week about the schism between Black women and white women started during the days of slavery, when of course they saw the face of their husbands and the face of these enslaved children. And when they knew where their husband was in the middle of the night, you know, he was not in her bed. And then they had foolish enough to take it out on Black women as though we wanted that to happen. But I think, I don't know, would you agree that that might be where the schism began?
Yeah, I believe it did, because we knew what was going on. We knew they knew what was going on, and they were taking their anger out on us. They were also taking out their frustration because they had no power, and it's a hierarchy. And I always say this phrase, you know, when you see the hierarchy of power, you see the person who gets yelled at on the job goes home and hits the person at home, and that person hits the child, and the child hits the dog, and the dog bites the cat chases the mouse. So you've got this flowing down of oppression from people who, in her realm, thinks she's above us, of course, by law and by dictates of society, but she's below him. And many of these women who were anti-slavery wanted slavery to end because they knew they had no control over their men. And they knew that this was something that was so horrific that was taking place. And the only way that they could stop it was by ending slavery altogether. So you had some white women who were anti-slavery just to stop this horrific rape of Black women. And they thought this was for the white family. In order to stop him, you have to stop the whole institution. And so she's for the white family of hearth and home to stop him from raping us. But still, once again, where's the support for us? Where is the need for people to see our position in this? And what white women also did when slavery ended, and we have like the case of women who were riding on public transportation, Black women on public transportation, white women would tell the conductor to throw them off. And you had, and this is one of my divas. Oh, here's another diva, okay? And you have Josephine DeQueer out of Louisiana, who was one of the richest Black women at the time during slavery. And she actually had enslaved Africans. Her family claims she treated them very well. I was like, she didn't treat them well enough to free them. But, you know, she studied in France as a child. I mean, this is how much money she had. Her parents sent her during slavery. This is a Black woman, a Creole, who was sent to France to study and then brought back again. That's how much money they had. And so, yes, and so after slavery ends, she's riding on a steamboat and she gets a ladies only ticket because the rooms and the places where the Black people were forced into were the nastiest ones. They had filthy toilets, no food. The men smoked, everything was crammed in one place. The rest of the ships and the railroad cars, like in Plessy versus Ferguson, the white people had leather seats. The women and the men were separated. They had another car just for women with children, and Black car was behind the engine. So all the smoke and soot and everything is going into the car we're on. She gets on after buying this ladies only ticket. They refuse, the white women refuse to allow her in the ladies section of the steamboat. And she refuses to go into the Black section. So she sits in the hallway the entire time for the trip. She comes out and brings a lawsuit. She wins the lawsuit and it's appealed and she loses before the US Supreme Court. This case comes before Plessy versus Ferguson. And they use this as a test case. And this is the foundation that gives rise to Plessy versus Ferguson's counter argument that they have to be able to segregate the races in order to maintain peace. They claim, and this is in her lawsuit, as well as the Plessy versus Ferguson lawsuit, that if Black people and white people are in the same car, railroad car, or the same steamship section, the white people will begin to beat up the Black people and there'll be chaos. And so in order to maintain peace and order, they have to segregate the races. This is the argument they use in Plessy versus Ferguson for racial segregation, because the white people could not control themselves and they would commit acts of violence if they were in the presence of anybody Black. So we have to keep the Black people away.
Because we were uncontrollable. Yeah, okay.
Because they were
I'm being facetious.
Yes, but on the other side, yes, but we're told that we can't be controlled, but this is under control white people because they refuse to arrest them. Once again, where are the prosecutors? They refuse to arrest them for torturing and beating us and assaulting us.
Or tearing up the Capitol.
Yes, or burning our houses down.
Yeah. So we're still doing the same thing. Like, there's how many arrests have come out of this Capitol building, and we know that was Black folks, it would have been a whole different story.
It would have been a slaughter.
So exactly, you're absolutely right. So nothing has changed. Roberta, your hand has been up for a minute. Go ahead with your question, please.
Thank you so much, Helen. Gloria, would you speak more about the backlash that you talked about? I have a situation that I'm dealing with right now. I serve as vice chair of the Marta Board of Directors, but it's only because I fought 5 years, introduced and passed legislation in the Georgia State Legislature to bring Marta to a community where the airport sits in Atlanta. We didn't have public transit. And so when I was able to, after 5 years, get the legislation on the ballot, to be able to get the people in the community to vote, we voted by 74% and passed it, and we started the service. Now it's come turns for my turn to serve as chair of the board, which was actually last year. They have done an active fight to keep me from ever serving as chair of the board of directors. That's a direct backlash that I see. It's mostly the white men on the board that's pushing this. I have successfully and maybe embarrassed them into having an ad hoc committee to talk about a change in policy that they have used for 40 years to rotate the board seat. But now all of a sudden, when it gets to my turn, they no longer want to observe that policy. I asked them to codify the policy because it is not codified in place. So can you speak a little bit about that and some suggestions, I guess, in terms of what we might do? And my dear friend, Supreme Court Justice Leah Sears is now our legal counsel for Marta. And she's a part of looking at this change in policy. But I would like to hear your feedback as well.
Well, I think you're right. I've seen so often in my own personal and professional life, and I'm sure most people here, if you've had a job, then you know what backlash is. Yeah. When you speak up, then some things happen. I would ask the question, where is the Black support or support from other people of color? Are they supporting you at all?
Not really. they don't seem to have much background. I'm a different ilk. I'm a community activist, a civil rights activist since I was 14 years old. And so I worked many years for Dr. Joseph Lowry. I've worked with Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson. I mean, that's my life. So I'm a natural born advocate and a natural born fighter. And my fellow African Americans on the board don't have those same experiences. Most of them come out of corporate America. Most of them don't ride public transit. They never have. And so it's a difference of shared experience, I think, that kind of makes them a little indifferent to what I'm saying and what the struggle is.
And I'm trying to think of a nice way to say this because it's Sunday. My major concern is this disavowalment of the struggle by the Black elite. I'm quite concerned that people are getting into these positions of power at greater numbers. I mean, we've always had people who get in positions of power and act like they don't know where they came from. But during the time period of segregation and mutual oppression, I just made that phrase up, mutual oppression, we were all in a situation in which something could happen to us, and we still are. Because many people think because they went to Harvard, Yale, or work at certain corporations, or they make a certain amount of money, that things don't happen to them. And then when they do, you know, they want everybody to ride in and act.
No, that's when they find people like me, you, Roberta, Linda, you know?
Yes.
So all these people who aren't rising to come to your defense, shame on them. They are a bigger part of the problem than the white people who are oppressing you. And that's
I have support from the community, but the community doesn't have a vote. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I mean, I'll put it this way. I'm glad that you're here to let us know what's going on. I have too often seen people in the Black elite who just want a softer pillow in the prison and better hours on the plantation. And so they're not really trying to make change because they figured out how to manipulate their way up within the structure as it is. True. So they're not trying to change the structure. They're just trying to get what they want so they can have what they can have in their own little community of their egotistical selves.
But we support them. We support that.
No, but I'm talking about people in private places as well as public places.
I get it, totally.
I mean, and what really concerns me is this number is growing. The further we get away from mutual oppression, the more people think that there's no problem until it happens to them personally. And so that means they're not there to actually support. They want you to be quiet. I had to tell somebody the other day, you know, you didn't get this job by being nice. And she thinks I'm a rabble rouser, and I am.
Yes.
But you need me and her. You need both of these. You know, people say you need a Rosa Parks and a Fannie Lou Hamer. Yeah. Okay, did you hear me? We need a Rosa Parks.
It was 5. It was 5. I heard this aloud. I'm gonna get your money, Mr. Carter.
Excuse me, who is that needs to be muted?
I think it's okay.
I'm muted.
Help me go. Yeah, I'm sorry, Gloria, go ahead.
Yeah, so we need both of those types of personalities. And I think that is, and a you know, a Shirley Chisholm. You know,
Lord, can you ladies please help me with the mute? That is Bashir again. Okay. All right, we got him. All right, go ahead.
Okay. So basically, I don't think it's just a one personality, one way of doing anything. We didn't get this far by only doing things one way. And so I would say, Roberta, find somebody who can be your ally, but they don't know it's your ally. And this is what, and Jocelyn Clopton Cooper, who's gone on now in 2015, was one of my mentors and you know, a beautiful friend of mine. And she said, I want you to say what you have to say 3 times, 3 different ways, and then let it go.
Okay.
And what you'll find is the person who heard it one of those three ways in which they are now able to hear it will seek you out. And it might only be two people, but those two people will be critical to what it is you want to do. So what they want is what happens too often when I do something, people are like, oh, she's going to come in, this, that, and the other. So I'll do like, okay, you think that's the way, I'm going to come in a different way. And plus have the meeting before the meeting, which we don't do often enough, is to have that meeting before the meeting to work out the strategy so that when you're in there, it might be somebody else who's saying exactly what you want to say, but it's coming from somebody else. Too often, how many times we've been in the room, I say something, it doesn't resonate. Somebody else says something, oh, that's a great idea. It's like, oh, okay, now it's a great idea. Wasn't a great idea 30 seconds ago when I said it because you didn't want it to come out of my mouth. Exactly. But if that's why I said it's time for partnerships and finding people who can be your allies.
Yeah, part of the issue, Gloria, was this. When I passed legislation, it was in the Republican administration. And I garnered Republican support because it was the right thing to do and it was a necessity. And the way that we did it was not racial. They tried to make it be a racial fight and we refused to do that. So when I went to the people and I said, you know, we've got elderly women walking up and down Terra Boulevard carrying groceries and sacks. We've got mothers with babies on one hip, a stroller and the groceries and trying to get from one place to the other on foot. That's how we shamed them, I guess, into saying, yeah, we buy it. And we got that support. But once I got on the board, it was immediate. Well, she thinks she's all this because she was able to bring this system. She brought people together. You know, she had a coalition, a national coalition actually, to fight for this. And so it was almost immediate backlash. So what they did, and I'm gonna shut up, what they did this year was make me vice chair. And at the same time, we have a Black woman that's the chair. Because they kind of got backed into it because the white man said, well, if y'all gonna do this, I'm not gonna serve as chair. So we ended up with the Black female chair and me as vice chair, but the vice chair position is supposed to shut me up about losing my turn to serve as chair. And so, you know, I understand, you know, I grew up in Georgia. So I understand these things when they bring the watermelon and they give you the extra chicken. I understand that very well. I just don't accept it.
Okay, thank you. Keep us posted on how that works out for you. I think somebody said Judy had a question. And anybody who has a question, please raise your hand. Those of you who are on the phone, you're just gonna have to jump in because you don't have a hand raised, but we'll acknowledge you. Judy, did you have a question?
Yes. So hi, Gloria. So a couple of things. One, could you repeat that thing you said about the first part about better hours on the plantation? You said something about a softer something.
Yeah, a softer pillow in the prison and better hours on the plantation. Too many Black elites get educated, they go to school and keep on going. And when they get in these jobs, they just want a softer pillow in the prison and better hours on the plantation. And that's all they're looking for. They're not looking for any real change because they feel that being nice and mealy-mouthed actually got them into these positions. And this is one thing that I heard Al Sharpton say that I think is very important. He said, you know, protesting might not have gotten you that job, but it got them to look at your application. Because they wouldn't have looked at your resume in the first place had people not been protesting. So they wouldn't have known you existed. So yes, your great education got you the job, hopefully, but you know, they wouldn't have gotten anywhere near you if there hadn't been protests going on for generations to make them look at your job application and resume.
Gloria, the other part is that when we go to those schools, we're not trained to serve our community. We're trained to serve them.
Yes. That is so important. And so that's why I came up with this phrase, weekend warriors. And we need to be weekend warriors. We don't have to wait to be paid for doing what it is. It's like we've got all of this talent, but we feel like we can only give that talent from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, when people are paying for us to do it in these other jobs. And we didn't get this far. Remember, we're talking about Rosa Parks? So Rosa Parks had her own business. You know, she was a seamstress. She was doing all these things. These were weekend warrior women. And so we have to be weekend warrior women where we actually use the same talents that people are paying for us to use and other talents we know we have that maybe they're not paying for us to use, and use those talents on the weekends and give that talent 10%, tithe your talent and become a weekend warrior. Anastasia.
So my other question, or the real question, was probably more suited to your other book, the voting rights one. And so I guess you mentioned something about that you cannot actually have equality without voting rights. And I'm trying to figure out what can we do, since we see all of these laws being passed against voting rights, suppressing voting rights across the country. What can individuals do? I mean, I know we're waiting for the White House and we're waiting for Congress and we're waiting. What can individuals do to try to assist in not losing these rights?
Well, one, in order for these things to happen, that means that they had to get voted on in the legislative bodies. And so we need to make sure that our politicians who are representing us, if you have whoever is representing us, tells us when they even first started discussing these oppressive voting laws. We need to know, because that's when certain people are really great with community organizing and protesting. We need to start the protest right then. It's like, hey, stop off, man. We see what you're doing. We're not going to let you do this. We're going to start talking about this right now. And you see, this is a capitalist country. How can we economically harm people? Because most of these legislators also have businesses. You know, we've got to know where these businesses are and how we can affect it economically. You see some of these corporations pulled out of Georgia because of these horribly biased laws that were being passed there and other places. So we have to do that. We need to understand that, yes, we have to continue to vote, and lawsuits are taking place. When the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was gutted, in June of 2013, they took away the pre-clearance clause and said it was unconstitutional. Now, this is going to be something, and I write about this in the Voting Rights War. And the Voting Rights War is all my books are accessible. As a matter of fact, what I do is I have my sophomores read the chapters, and they tell me, can you understand what I'm saying? Does this make sense to you? Are the words too long? I don't dumb down anything, but I know you don't have to use long words for everything. Sometimes I throw long words in because y'all need to learn some new words. Okay, so here's the thing. When they're filing these lawsuits, you don't hear anything, and like you're saying, you're waiting and waiting. But these organizations need money to keep these lawsuits going. Pre-clearance meant when they were going to change a voting law, they had to take it to the Attorney General's office or a 3-judge court in the federal court system and ask them, is this law going to be discriminatory? Is it going to have a negative impact on these particular groups of people, African Americans, Native Americans, Eskimos even, Asians? And so if they found that there was any discriminatory impact on them, they had to not do it. Chief Justice John Roberts, who really it's a shame, because Chief Justice John Roberts knew when he was a lawyer that he was known for his stance on voting rights. He gets to be Chief Justice, and his prize case is Shelby County versus Alabama, Shelby County, Alabama versus Holder. Why? Because these white people in Alabama had to go to Eric Holder, a Black man, during the time he was Attorney General, and ask him for permission to pass their laws. They were so angry about having to come. This is during the time when Obama's president, Eric Holder is Attorney General. They're so angered by having to go to a Black man and beg his permission to pass their voting rights law, that they then come up with this scheme to find the pre-clearance clause, which is the best part of the Voting Rights Act, to find it to be unconstitutional by Chief Justice John Roberts, who wrote the opinion. Chief Justice John Roberts was writing against Voting Rights Act for his time when he was a lawyer, before he even became a judge. He always was gunning to gut the Voting Rights Act. And so then for him to write the opinion in Shelby County versus Holder, it's been so much of a lie that this was in any way fair. They always wanted to take that provision out because now it costs a whole lot of money to bring these lawsuits. So while we're waiting, people are actually bringing lawsuits, but now they need money to bring these lawsuits. So one thing we can do is, if you know of organizations like the Brennan Center, like the NAACP and other organizations that are working on these voting rights cases, send them some money, and say, this is for voting rights. This isn't going in to pay the light bill. This is not going to give like other people a job. This is only for your voting rights cases. And it doesn't have to be a lot of money, but at least support financially the fact that instead of having these proposed laws pre-cleared, all of these laws now are just being put on the books, and they're saying, oh, if you don't like it, sue us, because it's going to cost you $1 million to bring a lawsuit. And Chief Justice Roberts knew this when he did this to us. And so it's so disingenuous for him as a Chief Justice to sit back and act like that he didn't already have a side in this when the case went before him. It was all planned out. They had been planning this for 20 years, and they finally got what they wanted. The last thing I remember on voting rights, somebody put in the chat, why is it that why can't you have voting rights, or why can't it be a permanent protection for voting rights? The Voting Rights Act has within it a clause that said that it has to be reauthorized. It's not that we lose our voting rights, but the voting rights authorization is one that has to be renewed through Congress. This was a compromise that President Lyndon Johnson made when he pressed for the Voting Rights Act in 1965. From blood, sweat, and tears, from the 4 little girls killed in the church, to the peaceful protesters who were beaten and thrown to the ground, and John Lewis knocked unconscious on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. All these things that happened to those 3 Black teenagers who were college students who were killed in Philadelphia, Mississippi. All these things led to the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and that pre-clearance provision. So for them to take that out is so horrendous. And that means every time you hear about a lawsuit trying to stop one of these, there are over 200 laws now that they put in place. Each lawsuit costs $1 million. So if you have a chance, yes, because you have to now have lawyers, you have to do all these things to bring a lawsuit each and every time. And so they've made it so hard, but it's not impossible, because we are free and on this Zoom call right now. And if they would have had their way, we'd still be picking cotton and being bred like animals. So we need to know that no matter how hard it is, our ancestors had it harder. And read my book, read somebody else's book, but also know that we can always push and make it better, because we're not going to give up. The motion and movement is forward.
Thanks.
Thank you, Gloria.
Anastasia, go ahead with your question.
Yeah.
And then we'll go to you, 810 area code, but let the Anastasia's been waiting for a minute.
All right, thank you. I just want to say, Miss Gloria, I admire you so much. Like, you're just such a repository of knowledge. It's very impressive. And I just really admire, one thing you said at the beginning of the call, like you're trying to keep yourself out of prison. And I feel like I identify so much with that. And yeah, I've just been trying to figure out what can I do? I'm actually an immigrant from Trinidad, and coming to America and seeing just how dire this situation is, just how long it's been going on, all of the history. It's how do I try to fit into this narrative and fight for more freedom for us, So I think I'm just so inspired by you. I just wanted to say that first. And so specifically, I work in criminal justice reform, which I think is such a slow moving field. And even with like George Floyd's murder last year, I think I'm only now starting to really process my emotions about it. I've never watched the video. I couldn't bring myself to, because I felt like it would actually make me go crazy, you know, in a very real way. Like I would just want to pounce on the nearest white person and beat them up. You know? And I think that I've been so disappointed by the lack of response from just America in general, but specifically from like the police, from like prosecutors, like you mentioned. I didn't even think about that aspect, but that's huge. And just the fact that like they really made it seem like it was this isolated incident, you know, they let him take the fall, which he definitely deserved, but like they make it seem as though this is not their whole entire MO, and like he's some kind of random off situation. And I feel like what would have been more encouraging is if they had just like scratched the whole system, start from like fire all existing cops with a record of having abused people or whatever, start fresh, screen properly, like look into their training. All cops should have spoken out, should have been just completely humiliated at this incident. And there was none of that. There was like the vast opposite of that. And I think like what I want my focus to be is like, how can I attack that aspect of the system? Because like these police are really out here just funneling our men into prison. And you know, it's about preservation of the Black family at this point. It's about whether we can even survive as a people, you know, with all of us, all of our men being incarcerated or like brutalized by cops, everything that they have to go through. And I just feel like we're in a place where so many people accept it as normal, and it's not normal. It's highly disturbing. And I feel like just as we abolish slavery, like we should be able to abolish this kind of behavior too, you know?
Well, I thank you. I thank you for being here and for what you've just said. And the criminal justice system is the major system that we need to focus on. And where you are, as slow moving as it is, you can give us some insights into what we need to be doing better, because there might be some lawsuits that need to be brought from things that you're seeing. I'm going to tell you this. Just the way we had national reform for voting rights with the Voting Rights Act of 1965, you have this job and I have my job, and so many others have this, or people of color, because of the 1964 Civil Rights Act that says that you cannot discriminate against race, religion, sex, national origin, or people of color. That's in the law in 1964. So when people come to this country, they don't even know why they're able to just get a job. That's because national legislation that we fought and died for as African Americans allowed that to happen. The 1968 Fair Housing Act, people fought and died in order to have housing that was not outright discriminatory. They used to have something called restrictive covenants in your lease that said you cannot lease this apartment, you cannot buy this house if you are a Mongoloid, which is they call Oriental or Asian, or if you were Jewish, or if you were African American, or you were Native American or Latino. They used to actually have it in the deed. The same way you sign a deed for your house or for your apartment, they had it written right there as one of the provisions. So that had to be taken out. People had to fight for that national reform. The next national reform has to be national criminal justice reform in the same way. They didn't think those other things could happen, but they did. And that's why you have to keep repeating, Anastasia, we need national criminal justice reform. Keep repeating. I keep saying this again and again, because national reform, if we even have great prosecutors in Philadelphia or Detroit, and I've talked to them, that's two places. You know, we have 18,000 police jurisdictions in this country. 18,000 police jurisdictions in this country. 2 prosecutors, Come on. So we've got to have it across the board. We are killing in this country by the hands of police over 1,000 people a year. Over 1,000 people a year. And sometimes the only reason why we know about it is because of social media or somebody captures it on their phone. So I propose that every prosecutor's office has to keep a record of everyone injured by police under penalty of perjury and file that information with the Attorney General's office. That should be in national legislation, so that if you don't, as a prosecutor, not only do you lose your license, because right now prosecutors have absolute immunity. We cannot sue them. We can sue police officers. They have qualified immunity. That means that it's very difficult to win, but we can sue them. We can't even sue prosecutors. So they need qualified immunity or no immunity at all. They need to lose their license and they need to go to prison when we find out that they have been withholding evidence or actually lying about evidence that's being used against people. Right now, we don't have any power against them. They're government employees with a union. So when I think about national criminal justice reform, we need to think about all the stuff we need and start looking at what needs to go into this national reform to make it happen. If we had national reform in voting rights, national reform in civil rights, national reform in housing, national reform in education, then we can have national reform in criminal justice.
Absolutely. This is a prime time, and 8:10, we're going to go to you next. This is a prime time, Gloria, for you to tell us about your film, your play, Shot. I just put it in the chat.
Thank you so much. And this is, I received a Pulitzer Center grant for this play, Shot, Caught a Soul. It's only 30 minutes long, and it's free. It is available to you. I am giving it away. And people think I'm crazy, and that's probably why I'm not rich, but I'll be rich in time, but I'm not gonna get rich off of this. Please, Anastasia, watch my film. And it's made on Zoom, so it's kind of clunky, but you can get through that. It actually, I have it in with Spanish subtitles and French subtitles. I paid for these French subtitles myself. That is how much I want you to take this film, watch it, and it's also based on a play. So if you want to actually put the play on, at the end of the film, you'll see where to contact to put on the play. In this short period of time, and I've had this played in colleges and in high schools in different parts of the country. So I want this in more colleges. I want this in more high schools. I want this around wherever you can put it, because it really puts it together when it comes to this issue of police-involved civilian killings.
I actually use it in my class, and I have the students critique it. And did I send their comments to you, Gloria? I don't remember.
I don't think so. But if
because
you have,
Tamika, another friend, had a play as well. I used hers too, so it might have been hers. I had them do that. But yeah, we used your and I'll use it again next semester. So thank you.
Yeah. And I want this last thing. The other film I have is Dreams of Emmett Till.
And let me put that on the chat.
That back in the chat along with the link to my book.
I will. Yeah, I'll keep posting all your stuff. I'm not sure who 810 is, but you had a question. You can speak up now. Area code 810. Is that person still with us? I can't tell.
Yes, I'd like to know how I can purchase her books directly from her.
That would be kind of difficult because that means me going, I'm about to leave town, actually.
Oh, okay.
I'm leaving town in the morning and not coming back for like a week and a half. And that's going to be very interesting because this is my first in-person speaking engagement. And I'm kind of nervous. So please send all travel prayers and mercies my way. I would appreciate it. I really, honestly, I'm scared. So,
I can't imagine why. I mean, I understand it because people, but look, just do you, girl.
Well, I'm scared about getting on that plane. That's what I'm talking about. Oh. Yes, I'm scared about this.
Oh, yeah, I haven't
these
done
people
that
acting out with all kind of road rage and plane rage and folks not wanting to wear a mask and just stuck on a plane with people. And this is a packed plane. There are no empty seats on this plane. So
Well, one of our friends, she bought a hazmat suit to travel in. I guess you don't have time to do that.
well, not yet, because I'm leaving first thing in the morning, but yeah.
Her link, 810. Are you Barbara's friend? I forgot your name.
Yes, I am.
Oh, remind me your name again. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm Kathy.
Kathy, I will.
A nice friend. I'm not as mean as she told you I was. I'm nice. I know her. I know Tracy. So how can I purchase the books? And I want to give
So
some
what
to
I will
rookies.
do is when we're finished with this call, you get my emails, correct?
Well, I'll have to. If Tracy has it, I'll get it from her because.
Okay, I'll send it out to everybody on this call. As in a link, I'll send all of her stuff. So you can get it that way. And if you're on the call, I've been putting everything in the chat. It's there for you. And Linda had proposed that we use this one of Gloria's films as an intro to us doing something different. But I think it's important that you have the film, the play, all of our information. So it's all there for you. And those of you who are listening on Facebook, I will place the information in the chat there for you as well. So any other questions before you've been so gracious, Gloria, you kept us all interested and intrigued. And I know you got to pack, so I'm not trying to hold you.
I do. I have to pack. And am I going over for dinner, Linda?
Well, yeah, I would just say, Gloria, I think it's really important that you tell them about your report that you release every so often, so that people are looking for the report, because there's information about entrepreneurship among Black women and girls. There's a lot of information that people don't know what Black women are doing in this country. So I think it's important that you talk just a little bit about that.
Okay, so I'm the founder of the Law and Policy Group, and every 2 years we publish a report on the status of Black women and girls. And the report on the status of Black women and girls is the only ongoing report on the state of Black women in America. We've been publishing this report since the early 2000s and every other year. And it's a report that speaks to rate of graduation rates from high school, for example, health issues and concerns, that women have one of the lowest rates of actually smoking cigarettes, but one of the highest rates of lung cancer. We have a section on spirituality. Women have the highest rate of spirituality of any group. We also, Black women vote at the highest rate, higher than any other group. That has started to fall off a little bit when it comes to the midterm elections, which goes back to voting rights. We can't just vote when it's the president. We also have to vote in midterm elections. That's how these conservatives get in office. They focus on the midterm elections when we don't vote. And I want to talk about very quickly 1890, the 1890 Mississippi Plan. The 1890 Mississippi Plan was the plan that put in place poll taxes, the voting suppression laws, literacy tests, and the grandfather clause. James Kimball Vardaman is the one behind this. Back then, this is a quote from what he said. This is from my book, The Voting Rights War. This is a quote. He said, why did he put these things in place? The Mississippi Plan started it and the rest of the states enacted it too, just like we're seeing right now. I want you to see what the similarities are from 1890. Black people gained the right to vote. Black men gained the right to vote in 1870. We had our first Black US senator in 1870. We had Black US representatives. We had Black US senators. We had Black men in all of these state and local offices, up to 4,000 of them. Mm-hmm. And then, as I said, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. They created the Ku Klux Klan, the John Birch Society, and all these other things. Then the Supreme Court jumped on board. And then the states started enacting the Mississippi Plan. James Kimball Vardaman says, he was the late governor of Mississippi and a US senator, quote, there is no use to equivocate or lie about the matter. Mm-hmm. Mississippi's Constitutional Convention was held for no other purpose than to eliminate the N-word from politics. Not the ignorant, the N-word. Quote, that is a quote from him in a speech. This is what we're dealing with. It's the power of the Black vote. The power of the Black vote got Ulysses S. Grant in office. They saw the power of this vote, and the backlash was voter suppression laws. Plessy versus Ferguson, law and violence. Lynching began to this uptick in 1882 of lynching Black people who were voting. So you had federal civil rights laws enacted in the 1860s and 1870s to protect our right to vote, but the state prosecutors would not protect us even then. And that's why we had to have federal civil rights laws. So when you hear about federal civil rights, we did federal civil rights back right after slavery ended because the state governments would not protect our rights. We always had to have federal civil rights. So what we're doing now and what we're trying to do and continue to do for generations to come is to make sure we don't lose any more ground and that we gain on top of what was gained by people who had so much less than we have right now. But what they had an abundance of, what they had more than what we have, courage.
That's right.
They had courage. They had the courage to say, I might not get there. It might be my grandchild. It might be somebody not in my family line. And this is what bothers me about the Black elite. They only want their children to have something. What we have was not because our family line alone wanted it. It was because other people who did not even know our names put something into the pot and hoped that there would be someone grateful enough to say thank you for it and use it wisely. That's us. So we need to know that when that baby was born in the cotton field, whether or not that field was in the 1700s, 1800s, or 1900s, it was with the sense that they could have more than the mother who gave birth to them. So we need to know we've got a generation of 2045. By 2045, the US Census has said this nation will be majority people of color. 2045, they are laying the groundwork right now for apartheid. You heard it. So don't come back later. Oh, I can't believe already. This is not a joke. I don't do this because I don't have anything else to do. These people are real.
Yeah.
These things happened. And if they happened before, they'll happen again.
Gloria, I will just add, you have to keep in mind too, that we weren't part of their economy until 1980 under affirmative action. So we really hadn't bought into this capitalist system. So we were less selfish. And we saw the bigger picture. People were more important than things. And that's what we lost. When you talk about the elite, everybody's trying to, live a certain lifestyle and show certain things to say that I'm better or whatever that is. But I think a lot of it has to do with people were more important than things then. And we weren't even part of their economy until almost 1980s.
But also look at it this way. I'm not against money. I like money. I like pretty things. Like Muhammad Ali said, I like pretty things because I'm pretty. Okay, here's the problem. Why can't you support the cause as well with that money?
Which is what they did.
No, this is because we used to.
Yeah.
The people who had money back then gave money to the cause.
Absolutely.
They didn't just use their money for pretty things.
Right.
But here's the thing. They say if you can control somebody's mind, you control their actions. I think some of these Black elite go, oh, but what if they find out? Then what's going to happen to me? Think about all these athletes with all this money. Think about all these people in corporate America with all this money, and you're not giving any money to the cause? Come on, you don't have to tell everybody you wrote the check. Just send the check in. Just put the donation in. So that's why I'm saying they've got them so brainwashed that this fear of even being associated with any cause makes them go, oh no, but what if they come up and they find out? They might not like me. They might do something bad to me. So they've already made up in their minds how they're a victim and they have no power. All this education, all this money, that big
miseducation,
but
Gloria.
Whatever it is, it still did not give them a sense of courage and not enough confidence Now, if you or I, as Roberta said, if we step to them, oh, they've got all the confidence in the world to put us down. But as far as helping the cause, this is why I'm saying, you know, there's so much that we are not doing with all the education that we have, all the money and resources we have, and we should be so much further along. If those people they pick to go into these offices actually cared about Black people as opposed to looking at being Black as a disability.
Right. Look, I can't let you go. I'm getting a text here that says, and I did say that I was going to ask you to talk about the legalities of the Cosby case. A lot of women are, you know, seeing only the woman's side of it without looking at the legalities of it. So from your work on the, you know, just understanding how the Supreme Court works, even at the state level, can you please explain that to folks who are listening?
Okay, and then I'm gonna have to go by 6:30.
I got it. We're gonna let you go.
Okay. So,
but before you go, I also want you to please put in the chats where people can contact you for paid speaking engagements, because I'm sure there's a lot of women on here who would love to invite you to their organization. So leave that information for us. But go ahead, very quickly, give us a legal synopsis on Cosby.
Okay, now Helen and I have talked about this in some detail, but here's the thing. When and I said the same thing to her. This is my John Jay email. When I was on Anderson Cooper, when Cosby was convicted, and they said that he was going to get a certain number of years, and I said this to Helen, and Anderson Cooper asked me, "How long do you think he's going to get?" And so they had this expert. I wish I could remember his name. You know this man's name. He was a white male attorney with he was on a lot of these cases and was on Anderson Cooper a lot with me. Anyway, so I said up to 10 years. They thought, oh no, she doesn't know what she's talking about. But I was saying, and then it went to commercial. Okay, here's what I have been saying when this first happened. When Cosby's criminal action was brought by that prosecutor, it was based on a sealed agreement. When there is a sealed agreement, that agreement is not to be unsealed. And so any of us who have been a part of any litigation whatsoever, we know that if there is some type of settlement, the agreement is that this is not to be discussed. We're going to give you this check. You go your way, I'll go my way, and that's it. Within the sealed agreement was information that was unsealed because this a prosecutor asked that it be unsealed and the judge allowed it to be unsealed. Both of those things were wrong. They should have used the evidence that was already made available to them. They cannot go to a sealed document and unseal it. And what was really wrong about this is that all of these corporations that enter into these settlement agreements, all of these businesses, jobs that enter into settlement agreements, they should have been up in arms, but they were not. Because that meant if they could open his settlement agreement, they could open any settlement agreement. This sets a bad precedent. So I was saying this, and I said it on my show on WBAI Law of the Land with Gloria Browne-Marshall on Tuesday mornings at 9 a.m. I said it on that show, but you know, nobody was listening because, you know, hey. And so that's why the evidence they used was evidence they could not use. And once you have tainted evidence, everything that comes from that tainted evidence, and it's called fruit of the poisonous tree. So once that one bite of the apple and that whole tree is poisoned by the fact that this was something that should not have been unsealed, anything that's gained from it is also poisoned and it cannot be used. Once you start chopping away at all the poisoned evidence that comes from that sealed document, then you have to throw out the case, because that meant that he was convicted under evidence that should not have been used. On the other hand, what prosecutors can do all the time, they can always ask, go to a grand jury and seek another indictment based on evidence that can be used. They can also, but it's going to be, they can't try him for the same crime twice. So this is going to be kind of interesting too, if they choose to go back and try him for this particular incident, how they're going to be able to do it. They could say, well, since it led to a dismissal of the case, then we're going to retry him based on other evidence that was not part of the sealed document. So that's
aren't they limited? First of all, let me say that since this thing happened, I've been saying that all along. Like, this is just ridiculous. Who would enter into an NDA if you knew, and pay her almost $4 million if you knew, in fact, that there's not some agreement that this is going to go away? It's just common sense. And it doesn't take a seasoned lawyer. I think a new lawyer in law school understands that. But people didn't want to hear that. That wasn't the narrative that was going to satisfy the fervor to get this Black man in prison for all those other women that we're talking about. This case is about one woman in Pennsylvania. End of discussion. So other women feeling vindicated by this was just ridiculous too. But, it goes back to the prosecutor. I don't know why, this prosecutor, there should be charges brought against him because he knew what he was doing. But in terms of the Supreme Court, can you talk about precedent? Because I think they threw it out because they knew good and darn well that they were not going to allow, they knew the danger, the repercussions of having a precedent of this matter set. And I believe that's why they had the integrity to throw it out, because they knew those corporate people that you're speaking of were going to have to pay the price for this one particular verdict.
Well, but you also see what happens when a prosecutor wants to get somebody.
Oh yeah.
And so they will trip up and do whatever they need to do to get somebody. But what are the consequences to the prosecutor? That goes full circle to what I was saying. You see it right in front of you. When these prosecutors do this and go into the Supreme Court, there are cases in which the Supreme Court has said that a prosecutor has acted with corruption, has acted with racial bias, has done these things that are against the legal ethics. That prosecutor is still in the job.
Or he's a judge himself by now, so none of it matters.
Yeah, they can rise up, they can do all these things in the political sphere. Nothing happens to them. And so those of you who were listening to my show, Law of the Land, you heard me interview the candidates for Manhattan DA. I made sure, and if you haven't heard it, you can go online in the archives and listen to these interviews I did, because our Manhattan District Attorney is the most powerful DA in this country. They are only under the US Attorney for their level of power and influence. They have a treasure chest of over $100 million. And this comes from confiscating people's property and then auctioning it off. This is a powerful position for anyone to be in. They influence what happens with prosecutors around the country. And I have asked each and every one of them, are you supporting national criminal justice reform? And they said no. Or they were hemming and hawing, or they were like, well, we're supporting incentives, but we're not going to force the states to do anything. So we're still in the same situation, even when and we're going to have, Alvin is going to be the next, Alvin Bragg is going to be the next Manhattan DA here, African-American man. And let's see what he does that's different. He claims he's got on the ground experience. He has family members who have been in the system, but we'll see, because he's going to be one rising up to this position and be that Black elite who will see what happens.
Gloria, his interview was weak. His interview was really, I heard all of them. He was not the strongest one in the bunch, and you did an excellent job.
But, and trying to be, ask these questions and trying to press people. And some people got on and thought it was a joke. They just thought, I'm just going to do this and breeze by, and I'm like, I gotta, show
as much as the other thing that as a community we don't want to talk about, which you alluded to, which I appreciate, is that Kamala Harris was not just a prosecutor. She was the Attorney General. And if anybody could have implemented these kinds of changes at a profound level, it was her, and she did not. And I don't understand why, as a Black community, we're not dealing with that, right? We have to stop protecting Black politicians, Black prosecutors, or whoever, just because they're Black. If they're not working in our interest, we need to not care who they are and call them out on it.
Well, and I want to say this other thing that I'm going to give Joe Biden credit for a split second, because I'm still looking for the push he promised, you know, around criminal justice reform, because he's actually starting to focus on these white supremacists. And, you know, and this is a scary topic, law and violence. You saw what they did to the Capitol. You don't know how many police officers and other federal law enforcement officers are part of these white supremacist organizations. So this whole thing is very scary, and trying to better understand how we are supposed to protect ourselves. I wouldn't call it a police officer. I've had 2 instances where I should have. I don't trust any of them. So I don't know who is officer friendly and who's officer deadly. I don't know. So I can't call them, you know? And so we've got to do something about criminal justice reform. We've got to do something about these white supremacists. And I'm trying to figure out how in the world we can better understand what our power, how our power can be used politically, and how our power can be used in criminal justice. We're gonna have to really start looking at people. And I'm not trying to do a so-called witch hunt, but I am trying to figure out who can be trusted.
All good points. And you know what? I know you have to pack. We wish you success on your speech, because I know that's going to be fine, but safety on your flight. And if you all can just unmute and give Gloria some love before she checks out, that would be great.
Thank you, Gloria.
Thank you. Appreciate you. And I'm praying for you for your flight.
Thank you.
Gloria.
Come back.
Pray that you come safely.
Thank you.
God bless you.
Thanks a lot.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot.
I'm buying the
Professor.
book. I'm
Great
buying
to
May
see
you
you.
continue
to
to
give
be
to somebody.
Thank you very much, Gloria.
Are you feeling
Great,
her love,
lovely.
Gloria?
Yes.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Helen, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to let Gloria
show.
go.
Thank you, Gloria. Thank you for inviting me, Miss Cox.
Absolutely.
So-
So look, wait a minute, guys. We're going to let
Thank you, Gloria.
We're going to thank
Safe
Gloria.
travels
Love you.
to and from.
And you know, and I've been trying to get her on here, so I'm so glad our schedules worked out today. And for all of you women who got on this call and stayed on this call, cannot thank you enough.
Thank you, Helen.
I'm going to get the information to all of you. Gloria, you are excused from class. And the rest of us, we can stay on here and chat for a few minutes, just to unwind and then talk about next steps. Gloria, I hope that you will come again and talk to us, because this was like so overpowered. It was just wonderful. Thank you so much.
And safe travels to you, Gloria, to and from.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. We love you, girl.
Please come back. Please come back.
Okay. Bye, Gloria. Okay, so now we're going to open up and just have a chat with all of us. I'm going to take me off spotlight. Let me see. Linda's on spotlight. So yeah, so anybody have anything that you just want to talk about? I thought that was fantastic. I loved it. Michelle, anybody have anything they just want to share with us that's happening in their world, or what they thought about what we did today?
Hey, Helen.
Yes.
This is Michelle.
Hey.
I think she was thank you so much for inviting her. She was an unbelievable wealth of knowledge.
Yes.
She was just so amazing. I mean, you very rarely hear people talk about the former governor. I'm sorry, I'm driving. The former governor of Mississippi, Senator Varman, and that's one of the quote that I put in the chat. That's one of my favorite quotes from him. And the reason why I share with people, because it's like, you got to think about it. This was a then governor, now senator. At that point, he was a senator. And what he's reflecting on is, this is why they targeted Black veterans coming back from World War II. Because they were like, oh, you know, they're walking around in their uniform. You trained them to shoot. You trained them to have pride in the flag. And they targeted them because they were like, before you know it, they're going to want rights here. Can you imagine? You're over there fighting overseas for democracy in some other country. And this is what's being said about you on the Senate floor.
Yeah. So that's what happened in World War I too. That's what led to all the riots.
Exactly. That's what happened.
Coming back home, expecting to be treated
and then we
like
know it got
instead of animals.
Perpetuated in the housing. You know, veterans was able to use housing. So when people like Trump are bragging about the godfather of housing, Mr. Levitt, Levitt and Sons, he deliberately said, I won't sell to blacks. So when you were buying, when a white grandfather coming back from World War II was able to buy using their benefits a cheap little tract house for 20 grand, you couldn't buy until late until the Fair Housing Act was passed in 1968. So you were already behind the curveball as far as wealth building.
Right.
So this is why I don't get when people are trying to be so, and I know you were going there earlier, and with the what is this thing they're debating you asked her about, but I guess you couldn't get into too much, Helen, the thing that people are anti to, critical race theory.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's my big picture understanding of it. I don't know it specifically myself. And I'd appreciate it. Anybody want to chime in and who has broken it down? Is there anybody who broke it down for others?
What Gloria said, it sort of started beforehand, but at the end of the day, a lot of it was in law schools looking at the law and how race impacted the law. The problem now, the white supremacist system doesn't want their children to know the real deal about US and world history. That's it at the end of the day. AKA,
right. So it's systemic racism. It's systemic racism.
Right. Don't tell the myths and illusions. I mean, only tell the myths and illusions of America. That's all you want them to know.
But when you say, for example, let's look at the 4th of July. If we look at when that document was signed, Black people were not considered human. Right. They weren't even, they were 3/5 of a person. So, I can't get with people when they're trying to say, oh, it's a perfect country. And again, America is great. Please, yes, I know I'm an immigrant and have benefited. America is great, but it doesn't mean she is without fault. If she wasn't without fault, they would not have had to amend that document. Mm-hmm. And I'm done with my soapbox, but I mean, you wouldn't have to amend it.
But all that's Marta.
Helen. What I was going to say is that what Black people have done since they got here is to try to make America what they profess that they are. And that's what we spend all these hundreds of years trying to do, make America better, to make it for everybody better. And as you said, everybody benefits from the work we've done. Everybody benefits from the work we've done around the world, not just in the United States, but around the world.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. This is Darlene. First of all, Helen, I want to say thank you very much. This was a great program. And I have more books to buy and read. And Linda, I definitely understand why you were groupie of
Gloria.
So yeah, Miss Gloria. So and yes, America, it's an ideal. It's not like the Constitution. When it was written, they knew exactly what they were writing. They knew exactly what they were doing. As they were trying to gain their freedom from the British, they knew that they were enslaving Black people. They understood the contradictions of what they were doing. But it did not matter because it wasn't truly that they cared about people in general, but they wanted to gain their economic freedom from England, not have to pay taxes, but use the free labor of slaves to enrich themselves. So
it was a business decision.
Exactly, absolutely, purely business, nothing else. And to support that, of course, you have all the ideas of race and racism that were created in order to support that decision. So yeah, America has a great, I would say, the ideal is great. What they wrote, all men are created equal and all of that. It's but the reality of it, yes, Linda, I'm gonna echo what you said. It's not until we fought, like Black people fought for their independence, Black people, we became free, Black people were able to gain certain civil rights, that America became the country that it is. And I am an immigrant also. So
but you're from Haiti. You're from Haiti, and there would not be in the United States if it hadn't been for the Haitians kicking out the French. So
Oh
that
yeah,
Haitian
absolutely.
to this.
And a lot of and Latin America, Haiti has helped many countries, Greece, Libya, all of that. So that's certainly. And look what just happened to our president, his assassination, which I would say don't believe the narrative. It's not easy to come in and assassinate a head of state the way it happened, and then to just get caught like that. No.
Okay.
That's not easy. And we know from history that history repeats itself in some ways. So but I have to
and
say,
we also know the many resources that are available in Haiti, and people want their hands on.
Oh yeah, that.
And the Clintons, all that money that came into them, that Bush and Clinton were raising, they were supposed to build all those houses. Only 2 houses were built, but magically all these hotels went up on these really pristine beaches in Haiti. So at the end of the day, we gotta look at U.S. tax dollars, taxpayers' tax dollars make us all complicit and co-signing in what's going on in Haiti, and has gone on to Haiti as an example of any other country who tries to kick out the white supremacists. This is an example of what you should not do. And this goes back to when people used to read. Remember, you used to read if you were a slave, and then they found you, they bring everybody together and whip you as a deterrent so that you will never try to read again. And that's what Haiti is. That's the example it stands for.
Let me do something real quick before we continue on. I got a text message that Judge Camille is on the call, and we want to offer our condolences to you for the loss of your daughter. And thank you so much for joining us, Judge Camille. Are you still with us?
Is he on?
I thought he was still with us, but maybe not. But anyway, I just wanted to offer our condolences from When Black Women Gather. Many of us are Black women attorneys in the state of New Jersey, and we feel your pain, as do all other women on this call. So thank you for joining us. Were you finished, Narlene? And I saw that Kim, you had your hand up. Narlene, were you done?
I don't know if she's still there, Helen.
She is, I see her. Okay, Kim, did you have a question? Kim Montfort?
Oh, she had to leave, Helen.
She's gone. Okay.
She had to leave. I'm sorry, I didn't know which one you were talking about.
Yeah, she had her hand up for a minute there. So does anybody have anything else that you want to add? And thank you all again for joining us today. And I'm going to send out all of this information that I can. So if you're on the email list, you're going to get it. If you're not, make sure you leave it in the chats, and I'll give it to you. If you're listening on Facebook, I will I will post it on Facebook as well. Roberta, real brief, did you want to share something with us?
Just wanted to say this has been food for my soul. This was very, very enlightening, and I'm waiting to hear next steps. So thank you very much, and thank Dr. Boland for inviting me.
Great. Yeah, so next step. So our next meeting, we've been doing every other weekend for this summer. We had a break this last week because of the holiday. So it's actually been 3 weeks. And thank you all for showing up. So we will meet, what's 2 Sundays from now? I'm not even sure what the date is. The 25th, July 25th, we will meet again online. And I don't know what our topic will be, but it will be something good. I think, I was on a call with a friend of mine on Wednesday night, which was the actual morning, a day that the president in Haiti was assassinated. And we had one of my friends from Haiti gave a wonderful presentation. So I could have him on, we can talk about that. Those of you who did not join us on Father's Day missed a real treat with Dr. Cleo Minago. And he wants to come back and talk to us again. And that was a powerful, oh my God, you think she was good? He's right up there with her. So we might do that again as well. Miss Hampton, I see your hand is up.
You know, I would have to seize the moment because I'm, you know, I've joined you many times and I live in St. Croix in the Virgin Islands, but I'm here in Maryland getting cancer treatment. I've been a breast cancer advocate for the past 5 years and I wanted to share, I put the link up. All of you are invited to participate. It's a free online virtual art classes for breast cancer. It's called Art Therapy for Breast Cancer Survivors. So please join us in supporting this initiative because I know all of our families have been impacted by breast cancer and that, you know, and a lot of it stems when I listened to your speaker this evening, this evening, and she talked about how cruel the women were treated on the plantation. And I believe that a lot of the issues that that affect our physical and mental health, the breast cancer or cancer, it's an attributing factor from our historic background. And so that being said, I just want to encourage everyone to take advantage and join us as we continue to support African-American women and women in general, particularly women of color, because we have the highest death rate in this country, and it's not going down, and we still don't have the cure for cancer. So please feel free to log in. I put the web connection online, and
drop it in the chat one more time so it'll be more fresh. Okay. And know that you have you have our prayers and hopes of full recovery for yourself.
Thank you so much.
Definitely.
There it is. The VI Breast Cancer Project.
Absolutely. Thank you. I also want to give a shout out and say thank you to those of you who during this call, people were, you know, leaving donations on the links that I gave. So thank you so much for that as well. And Jennifer had an idea. I saw, what did you say, Jennifer, about your $10 donation? Jennifer?
Hold on a second. I'm lost there.
Okay, we got you. We hear you.
I said that if everybody on the chat could at least leave at the least $10 each, that would be a beautiful thing for our organization to put towards any effort to fight against the voter suppression.
It's crucial, which is crucial.
And I would add, in the people don't realize, but in the East Coast, everybody looks at the South. But if you look at places like New Jersey, for example, line A is voter suppression. So I'm just saying, I'm not saying people in there are not good, that you shouldn't consider voting for them. But people need to realize that there's voter suppression in the North too. It's not just in the South. That's the obvious place, and people divert our attention to that. But it's happening in Michigan. It's happening in California. It's happening in all these so-called good places. So pay attention. As Teddy Pendergrass said, wake up, everybody, pay attention.
Yes. No more sleeping in bed.
No more sleeping in bed. Yeah, and I haven't followed this, so I really can't speak to it. But for those of you who are in New Jersey, I've seen at least 2 Black organizations who are challenging Governor Murphy for not living up to campaign promises. So I don't know if anybody has been involved in any of that. But yeah, so we really have to do better at, and I put something on Facebook today, like, what do we do? Do we just say we're not voting anymore? Like, what do we do to have an impact? Because the campaign promises last as long as the campaign. That's it. And we cannot keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So as a people, what are we going to do? And I don't have the answer. I don't know. But we've been conditioned to vote as we should, and there is power in our vote. And we're in a interesting place because as we become aware of the power of our vote, the vigor to oppress our vote magnifies. So is this a time to sit out? I don't know. I don't know if that's the answer, but I think something we got to do different.
Actually, Bob Laws, who is the COTEP, has a list, and I can't pull it up right now. But the next time we talk about, I think it's really important for us to look at what we require as leadership. And he had like 10 points that we need to look at in terms of the people come in. I said, somebody just mentioned, I think it was Gloria, that said she talked to somebody and they said, she asked him, how come we're finding out information at the last minute? He said, but if I tell you, they won't let us in the room. What's the sense of being in the room? So we have to
Thank you.
identify people. We have to identify people with courage. I always tell people at the end of the day, if you want to know what you should expect from your politician without me remembering the 10 things Bob Law said, Adam Clayton Powell should be the baseline for what you expect. He's the only elected official who was willing to die for his constituents. Mind you, he didn't have corporate money, and the people in his church pretty much paid for everything. But the point is that they're not willing to die for us. And I think sometimes we think they will. But you know, if you want to understand, Shirley Chisholm is another example of what you want in an elected official. You have models of people. We need to
the Black Panthers, they left us the blueprint.
Right. But keep what I'm saying. Elected officials are not leaders. Leaders are willing to die for you. And we get that confused, right? We need to understand what it is we should expect from them and demand it of them. Otherwise, they go in a room and they go for themselves. And in this area, there's a drive. They used to take people, and I've been watching politics in Essex County for a long time. They used to take people on a ride in the car and tell them you're a special Negro. And then when they get tired of it, they kick you to the curb. So I'm just saying that we have to look at the people we put up there and do they have courage? And we have models. We have Shirley, we had Harold Washington. Unfortunately, he died of a heart attack, but he was a potential model, in a more recent time. But Adam Clayton Powell, if they're not willing to be for you what he is, they are definitely not leaders. They're elected officials and they go with whatever the wind blows. I will leave this. One of the things that my students have to do for the final in American government, they have to identify every elected official at every level, federal, state, county, local. And they need to be able to cite the authority for that position. What's the job description for that position? What are the skills required for that position? And does this person have those skills to perform at the level that their constituency should expect?
Let me dare, and we're going to really end here because we could go on forever. But I would dare say when we talk about politicians who were for the Black community, we should not sleep on Marion Barry. Unfortunately, we will remember him as someone who got caught in the room with crack or whatever. But there was a reason that there was such aggression to bring him down. And I lived in DC when all this was happening. And I remember even thinking then, when they start setting white boys up in hotel rooms with their friends, I'll support this. But I just could not support what happened to him. And it clouds his history, because if you look at his history, he was a hell of a politician, and the reason they wanted him gone is because we could not do business in Washington, D.C. without entertaining Black contractors. Black people were a part of all the deals, and that was not. And if you go to D.C. now, you could be from D.C. and not recognize it. So there was a reason that they wanted to get Marion Barry out of office, because there's no way that they could have done what's happening in Washington right now with him being in office without us getting some of the wealth too, because it would be interesting to see how many of these major contracts in Washington, D.C. have Black folks, large Black representation on them. So on that note, love you ladies dearly. We are going to end this call. And if I can
Helen, one thing, Helen.
Yes.
I think not only should we be aware of that, but we should also be very much aware of where and how we spend our money, because our money is very important as well. And we shouldn't be supporting the very people that's got the rope around our neck.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so on that note, thank you, Ms. J. I'm going to ask you again if I don't have your contact information. See, you don't want to miss the next session, so make sure you leave me your information.
Thank you. You're awesome.
Thank you, Ms. Cynthia calling in from New York. And I think Chris B, is that Chris Berry?
Yes, that's me. That's me, Chris Berry. How are you?
New York is in the house.
Okay, yeah, like I said, we in the building, as they say, but in.
Yes. So we're going.
So wonderful chat.
Thank you. I enjoyed everybody today. It was great. Now, what I didn't do, so I'm going to need help. I got so focused on Gloria and excited, and I started the Facebook chat and forgot to set the recording for Zoom. So somebody here knows how to, but the whole thing is on Facebook. So whoever can help me make that into a link, I will share this link with everybody because I just think this was a really powerful session.
Yes,
and I
it was.
want to have it. So Lisa, I think you can help me with that, can't you? Or Beth Ann?
Of course I cannot. I'm not saying.
Beth Ann,
It looks
can
like
you?
it's recording. Yes,
It
it's
is.
definitely recording.
It
Yes.
is. I just didn't, I got to figure out how to get it. Okay, we'll talk. Okay,
Yes.
so everyone, thank you so much. And we're going to sign you all out. And if you committee folks want to hang around for a minute so we can talk, that'll be good. Michelle,
right.
I love you, dear. Thank you for your comments as always.
Nice.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. This is Donna
Yes.
from Athens, Georgia. Goodbye.
Thank you, Donna.
Bye, everybody.
Make sure you buy her
New York.
book.
Good night,
everyone.
ladies.
Buy
So
her book
long.
and invite her to come speak to your organizations. You'll be the hero for the day.
I'll get on it. Thank you very much. God bless
All
everyone.
right. Bye,
Have a blessed week.
Anita.
Have a blessed
Thank
week.
you.
Bye.
Bye, Chris.
Hi, ladies.
So
Good night,
long,
Miss
Helen. Thank
Marlene. Love
you.
you, girl.
Love you too. Bye.
All right. So you all, we can start. Diane Tillman, you didn't say anything today. What's going on with you? She always talks. I'm going off Facebook right now, and I'm going to stop recording. Okay. And stop